All right, start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your host, Ben, and this is your Week 23 review show. And so, leading off, we're going to have we had a goal fest on Saturday. I guess I'll get started on Saturday before what happened on Sunday. The interesting thing was a lot of these teams, or I guess everyone played each other. It was the week before Christmas, and in some of those cases, Brighton versus Palace. I think it ended just 1-1. Luton and Newcastle. It was just 1-0 in those games, and I was just wondering maybe the quick turnaround. Maybe teams were able or coaches were able to discover some vulnerabilities they missed the first time because we saw something entirely different on Saturday for both those teams. But the leading off story really is with what happened with Arsenal and Liverpool. There was a lot of talk that there's only a two horse title race, and maybe not so fast. Arsenal do get the better of Liverpool, winning the grudge match at the Emirates 3-1. Fairly sloppy game, but Arsenal kind of deserve credit for that. Their three sloppy goals, so I feel like that was fitting. But Arsenal were quite good. Liverpool were dreadful, and I'll get into my theories into maybe why for both. Arteta got the better of Klopp in what he lined up with. That played a big role as well. Tottenham missed a big opportunity on the weekend to actually maybe get into the discussion as well. But they were able, and it looks like they were about to get the 3 points versus Everton. There wasn't really their best day, to be fair, but really, the hero before the the 90th minute was Richarlison. Richarlison came back to Goodison Park and kind of haunted his old club a little bit, scoring 2 goals. Richarlison is on a bit of a heater. That's news as well. You know, Tottenham have been missing Son, and they've been able to. They've only recently got James Madison back, and the reason why they're somewhat still in this. In fact, I think they either passed Villa or they had a chance to pass Aston Villa. They missed with the result here. But it has been Richarlison. Richarlison has really kept them afloat, and he just keeps scoring goals for fun now. But as I mentioned, it was a missed opportunity because they do actually only end up getting a point here because Vicario was struggling on free kicks, and that could be probably the theme of that game. And Everton, to be fair, were actually probably fitting of getting something in the game. They made Spurs look quite pedestrian, to be honest, in midfield for the most part. They were able to get Idris Gueye back, and I think he had a couple timely interceptions. And Everton were doing pretty well to actually get some balls, behind Aston Villa's high line. And if it wasn't for Mickey Van de Ven, Everton maybe could have won this comfortably. To be honest, I thought they were the team actually on the back foot or front foot for the most part in the second half. So the draw does feel fitting, and it is 2 goals that they give up on set pieces, and there's just like a free kick at the very end, and unfortunately, Vicario and Everton aren't able, or Spurs aren't able to handle it, and Braithwaite gets the goal that I think Everton deserved, and it was a big point for them because I think it got them out of the last place spot, but they're right in the thick of it as well, and we'll find out maybe at the end. They said at the end of the month what their punishment really is, because there's been talks maybe that 10 point deduction could be reduced to 6, but there's also other sanctions possibly on the way as well. We really don't know what's going to happen with Everton and Nottingham Forest, and that could be that'll be another kind of theme or story heading into this as well, because what happens with them, whether or not it's Luton, it might not even be Luton in that spot. It could be Crystal Palace. That's kind of with those uh, with those teams. But keeping up with what happened in the week, Man United continued their good week with their birthday boy Rasmus Højlund celebrating his 21st in quite good fashion with another goal. Rasmus is quietly on a heater, and but as it looked like everything was actually looking up for Man United. Garnacho with 2 goals as well. You know, Garnacho, Rasmus, Kobe Mano was kind of the hero in the midweek, and you're starting to see a little youth core come together, and everything was starting to look bright. And then it looks like Lisandro Martinez maybe suffered another long-term injury. We'll have to see. There's something with his knee. Maybe it's not as bad as it looked. But I mean, he's only just returned, and since he's come back, they have looked better. They've looked better in possession. He's aggressive too. Instead of allowing teams to just kind of get the ball and turn on you, Martinez is really good at running and trying to prevent teams from being able to do that. And the only interesting thing here is with the Ten Hag had Rafael Varane healthy and good to go, and he instead with Harry Maguire, and I think that actually allowed West Ham to enjoy some of their football because this game was weird. Man United never really looked like they were necessarily in trouble or in danger of losing this game, but at the same time, West Ham had 22 shots, only 3 on target. That was kind of the reason. Like a lot of the really only their out of those looks, maybe 1 or 2 came to Jared Bowen, but it was coming to others. And you never really felt like Onana had to make a ton of saves or a ton of like really hard saves. A lot of stuff was hit right at him, but this was a bit of a wild game as well. And then another one that was a bit bonkers was the Chelsea and Wolves game, and Chelsea continued to look an absolute mess. If Pochettino wanted a response after the Liverpool game, he did not get it. They started okay. They actually got the first goal, pretty good through ball by Caicedo for the goal, and even before that, there was a nice through ball by Enzo that played in Cuckoo, and it looked like he was maybe about to get his game going, and but unfortunately, that was kind of the end, at least when it came to Nkunku being dangerous. Chelsea, I think, created 6 chances on the day, but again, not many were actually able to be put on target or actually really to force Neto into making a save. Sterling had one that just missed wide. Jackson had a pretty big miss as well, and that kind of is where Chelsea's at. They can create a lot. They seem to control most games in possession, but at the same time, they are vulnerable. And I think I highlighted it after the Liverpool game last week that I think a lot of it really is Thiago Silva, and it's funny because they lose Chelsea lose 4-2, and Thiago Silva gets kind of like the last goal in the 90th minute, and I think people wanted to kind of celebrate him a little bit. He's quite responsible for at least the third goal because Neto just completely burns him for pace, and I think he's responsible for other goals as well. He's just so late to he just can't can't make any runs backwards anymore, and so he has to play really deep. And when there's few times when, say, Chilwell is played out of position and he has to actually cover and mark someone out wide, he can't do it. And so that's just that's just where they are. And apparently, after the game, there were some reports that uh, there's locker room gossip now. Someone at the club is leaking stuff outside, and there's a lot of questions on who deserves blame here. Is it the manager? Is it the training staff? It seems like everyone is taking turns getting thrown under the bus, and that is not where you really want to be. Because it feels like when that starts to happen, that's when one obviously the manager has lost the locker room, but two, I don't necessarily know how much of this is on Pochettino. To be honest, I think another thing too is he's going to be an easy scapegoat. But you have to look at the recruitment who looked at a lot of these players because they went high, super high on potential in a way that just never really made sense. They overpaid for potential. And a lot of these, I mean, some of these guys I even wanted, some of these guys I was talking up, like Mudrick, Enzo, but it never made sense to be 120 million for Enzo. Casado for 110 million after only 1 season at Brighton didn't make a ton of sense either, even though Liverpool wanted to pay that kind of fee. So they just they went really high on that, and they don't really have a ton of senior players, in that locker room other than maybe Thiago Silva to help those guys kind of learn how to be professional. They're also on really high wages, and they're on 10-year contracts, so it's not necessarily great for Chelsea. And when I get to them, there were talks that they might be hit with financial fair play sometime in the summer if they don't get things right. So I mean, there's a lot of talk that or there was talk coming in that Chelsea would just go out and buy another striker for $200 million. It doesn't seem like they can do that now, but we'll have to see. But it was a game also for Wolves to celebrate what Gary O'Neill has done. He's done the double on Chelsea as well, and none of that feels surprising or unwarranted. to be honest, and quite a sign of a good manager is getting your team to be able to bounce back after maybe a disappointment with what happened with Man United because they came back in the game at the very last minute. It looked like they were able to get a point, 3-3, and then all of a sudden they allowed Kobe Mano to go video game on them a little bit and score at the last second to kind of lose it all. But you didn't see any kind of hangover effect, and even they went down a goal in this game, and they were able to quickly come back. Mateus Cunha with a hat trick, worth saying as well, and it's they're doing this without Min Song. I mean, no, Wang Li Chan, who is flying for Asia Cup. And so they're eventually gonna get him back, and I think before, Mateus Cunha started to go on a heater, he was maybe their leading scorer, and, they were able to they had to go through that whole November through, December, January stretch without, Pedro Neto, and he's back, and man, is he flying again. There's no indication, that he doesn't have his pace or he doesn't, trust his body anymore. He looks equally as fast and equally as hungry as before. And then, probably the blockbuster game on Saturday was Luton. Luton and Newcastle just, it's one thing maybe you could explain away what, Luton were able to do versus Brighton because you looked at the lineup, maybe Luton would be a little more physically imposing. Brighton looked, kind of a smaller team, and, here you would think, well, maybe Newcastle would match up a little bit better against that, and no, it was basically the same kinda chaos. It looks like uh, their manager, Ross Edwards, has done a really good job. Edwards has been done a really good job of just getting these players to believe in themselves. Uh, and I can't believe that this is the same team that I watched them play at an Everton game back in October. I think they had 115 passes total at like 50% accuracy, and I just can't believe this is the same team. Now, Sambi Lokanga has since come on. He wasn't playing early in the season. I think he was suffering with an injury, and Ross Barkley has come in as well, and just that midfield looks much better. They look much more control and sure of themselves, and just frankly, Adebayo and Carlton Morris do as well. And it seems like this is quite repeatable. To be honest, now they did ship for themselves, so I mean, defensively they still can maybe get got at, but at the same time, it seems they're taking a lot of risk because they're maybe they don't feel like they can defend in a block. So what they're doing is they're actually making games quite open. They're one of the higher, more intense pressing sides now without the ball. Sometimes that comes off, but sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, there's a lot of space to attack, and that's what Newcastle were enjoying. Uh, I mean, of 8 goals, 4 to 4. This was a fun game, and it honestly could have been more. It felt like it could have been more because Newcastle even down 2 goals around the 60th minute mark, and then they got two back, and it was a 4-4 game basically around like the 70th minute. So tons of time still to go, a lot of stoppage time as well, and Luton actually did a pretty good job to regroup because it's felt like Luton actually had the game in hand, and all of a sudden you ship two in. Really, the way that Newcastle will get the fourth goal too, it's a stunner by Harvey Barnes, and good to see him back because he's been missing a little bit, and. There was just a lot of reaction and emotion to this game because it kind of came out of nowhere, but at the same time, it's good. It's great to see, and again, Luton are one of the feel good stories of the year. Certainly, if they can hold on, and at the minute, it almost seems like they're actually in the driving seat where they can maybe control their destiny. What happens will be what they're able to do, and not necessarily having to rely on others. And with Newcastle, I don't really know how Eddie Howe should feel. I feel that it's maybe I think when you look at how the goals were conceded, a lot of it was maybe on Dan Burn's side, and Dan Burn versus someone as fast, as speedy as Ogbeni never really seems like that would be a good matchup. And it looked like Luton were pretty good at exploiting it. So maybe Eddie Howe got that kind of wrong, but for the most part, I thought they did well to regain themselves. They're losing, they're down 2 goals in the second half, and they never really panicked. Bruno Guimaraes and Trippier were spectacular in the second half, at least offensively, and it's good to see him bring on Harvey Barnes, and Barnes came on and got a wonderful goal. To remind himself of what the quality that he's had, they've missed him since I think September. Maybe the only negative is they did lose Anthony Gordon. I don't necessarily know if it was precautionary or not, but he was subbed at halftime, and he was doing quite well, at least in the first half. So this was a bonkers end to end kind of game where it seemed like neither team really respected each other's back line, and this was at least from a neutral. This is what you really wanted to see, and then, moving on to, I mentioned how, Brighton, were at the fault of, Luton's, scoring barrage, in the midweek. They kind of took some of their frustrations on Roy Hodgson's, Crystal Palace scoring for, themselves. Roberto De Zerbi got maybe the reaction that he would have wanted. He made some changes, to the squad, which I think impacted or, contributed a little bit as well. Tyreek Lamptey, he basically changed both fullbacks, Tyreek Lamptey and, this young guy, Henselwood. So no James Milner. I thought James Milner was kind of at fault for a couple of those Luton goals. But, really, it was a story of João Pedro just being able to kind of have his way a little bit with Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace had no way to lay a glove on him, and he was kind of he had a part in really all 3 or all 4 goals. Uh, and then looking at Crystal Palace, on their end, this is as a nightmarish of a day as you can maybe expect because it's not just one that they ship for, the fans were really going at the players at the end, but, they lost Mark Gahey in this game. They weren't able to play Eze, and then, at least they didn't start the game, and then they're losing 3-0 at halftime, and where Hodgson, decides to risk playing Elise to maybe try to get them back in it, and I think, Brighton have a corner kick, and it looks like Palace maybe have a chance to do a counter, and it's just, it's Elise versus a Brighton center back, and he think maybe it's Van Hecke, and he thinks he has a chance to outrun them, and Elise goes into a sprint and immediately pulls up with his hamstring, and so you don't want that to be what it looks like because he's already had hamstring issues. If he made it any kind of worse, uh, you're probably not gonna see him for another month, and without Elise and Eze, I don't know if Palace can stay up. That's something I was talking about last week after they beat Sheffield. They beat Sheffield because of Elise and Eze just being individually good. Without those 2, you start to look and you struggle to find out where, who in that midfield can create or who, in their front line can create for them. It starts to get quite dicey, and one of the unfortunate things is I think when you think of a veteran manager, someone like Hodgson, he should be in that situation to understand what risking a someone on a hamstring injury would mean. It's a 3-0 kind of game. It was weird to see that even risked because it felt like the game was already over. It's not like they had to win the game. Maybe it was just kind of trying to get a response, trying to show something in the second half. But yeah, and maybe it shows that Hodgson is under pressure by the leadership in charge. I don't really know, but that's as disastrous of a Saturday as probably Hodgson and Palace could have expected, and they're probably going to rely on Everton and Nottingham Forest getting a sanction later on. Otherwise, I kind of think they could be the third team to go down. Um, Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth. Speaking of them, played to a 1-1 draw. Not a ton happened in this game. Uh, I think Bournemouth for the second game in a row were able to get an early goal start, but they weren't really able to create much after that. I think Solaki only had a couple of touches. They only had really 2 shots on goal all game. The only real highlight here is Giorena did come on, so that was positive. He had a final like 10 minutes, but where they weren't really able to create much as far as goal scoring chances either. Maybe the negative, I guess, for Nottingham Forest is Bournemouth did have to lose a man. Philip Billing went to ground and actually did, I guess he stomped on the ankle of Callum Hudson-Odoi, and it was kind of a bit of a scary challenge because everyone knows about Odoi having an Achilles injury. Actually, he ruptured it, I think, maybe a few years ago, and it took a while for him to actually get back. And he scored a beautiful goal. The reason why they got something in this game is because of his wonderful curler from outside the box, and so not not necessarily great there. I mean, Nottingham Forest did have a chance to maybe maybe win the game. Having 10 minutes plus, I think it was 7 in extra time to do something, but they really weren't able to even force a chance to force the keeper to make a save. And then likewise, Fulham and Burnley also played to a draw. Not really what Fulham would have wanted because they were up 2-0 in this game, and company made a sub, brought on new loanee signing David Datoro Fofana. I think he actually is a Chelsea player now, but Chelsea never really wanted to play him. They shipped him out to Germany, and I guess he was doing okay in Germany, and they decided to maybe he was at Union Berlin, and Burnley were like, "We'll take him," and whoever has the talent ID there, give him a raise because all he's done is he's netted 3 times in 2 games, and he basically comes on and saves Burnley a point. Now, and the only thing is, saving winning points here and there isn't necessarily going to be enough. They're going to need to start taking max points somewhere, and the one, I mean, it's good for them to get their offense going a little bit, but the goals they conceded, it's still quite too easily. I think it's just a corner kick, and then there's just a loose ball over the top where Munoz is able to just 1v1. No one tracks him, and he just has to chip Trafford. So I mean, the goals they're conceded is still quite poor. They had to do come to Anfield to play Liverpool. We'll see if Fofana can do something in the midweek, and then kind of finishing off Sheffield. Maybe penciled themselves in as I mentioned one of those teams to go down. Burnley looked like they could possibly be the other, and just I think they even said that by shipping in five, and they shipped in five basically 45 minutes into the game, that it's the most goals now conceded for as they've set a record for most goals conceded to this many games in the season, and they brought in Chris Wilder. Ugh. They brought in Chris Wilder to kind of steady the ship a little bit. It didn't really feel like he was going to be able to keep them up anyways. It did feel like though before this they'd been playing better, but that said, Bremerton Diaz has at least given them some life. They played okay versus Crystal Palace, but at the same time, they shipped three in that game. A couple really worldly finishes, but still. And then the last 2 home games, they shipped 5 to Villa, they shipped 5 to Brighton in the FA Cup game, and so all of a sudden, it's not looking any different, to be honest. And I mean, I guess one thing you can say is it wasn't another 8-0 or 9-0 kind of game, which it felt like it easily could have been. Aston Villa probably could have picked whatever number they wanted. So I guess maybe you can say a little of that. Final 20 minutes of the game, Aston Villa were trying to, bring in some younger guys. I think Emre Kante had an injury scare, so that kind of killed their desire to really pound it on. And Wilder did bring on I think it was Cameron Archer, and they gave it a go a little bit in the final 20 minutes and made Emery Martinez really have to work to get that clean sheet. So that's maybe something to hold on to. It's not like they gave up. They didn't give up like they did versus Newcastle, so it wasn't another 8-0 kind of game. But that's kind of grabbing at straws. So that's kind of where we're at least. That's setting us up. And getting started, I will start with Liverpool and Arsenal. And I'm not necessarily in my usual cherry mood because of this. And so they do lose 3-1. I think it's the second game they've lost this season. I mean, the real thing is, I mean, had they just been able to eke a point, uh, they would have still somewhat been okay. Basically, it comes down to Liverpool have to beat Man City at Anfield at that return game in March, and then not really drop points after that. But doing this now, they've lost any kind of wiggle room. So we'll see how it goes from here. You're starting to maybe see some of the injuries and player the players that aren't available start to show up. I mean, the only reason why they got a point versus Arsenal in the Anfield fixture was because of Mo Salah's individual brilliance. So you missed him this game. Here, news broke out that Connor Bradley lost his father. Maybe that actually had an effect on the rest of the team. I don't know, I mean, they went into this game kind of weird, but that basically meant Bradley couldn't go. Trent Alexander-Arnold had to go, and he didn't look fit. And he had probably one of his worst showings in really all season. It seemed like he didn't really want to sprint back to defend Martinelli, and he was basically demanding that Kanate would do it just himself. And that was a lot of pressure to put on Kanate, and it didn't work out. And really, Arsenal probably could have been this number could have been worse actually. Had Martinelli been better with his decision making, or maybe Arsenal had been better with their finishing because uh, I think they created something like six big chances, and just it felt like they really liked that matchup. Uh, it was interesting to see what Arteta did actually playing not just Jorginho but also Kai Havertz. And I was trying to think in that FA Cup game a couple of weeks ago. Arsenal really did outplay Liverpool, at least in that first half, and the fix was Klopp deciding to play Darwin Núñez and Luis Diaz out on the wings, and they just went long to try to go over Arsenal's press. Well, the Darwin Núñez wasn't able to go, at least in the first half, and Liverpool struggled a lot with that. You see how much Darwin Núñez, or at least Darwin Núñez when Salah isn't there, you lost the two basically the two main forward players that can make those runs in behind that do kind of push back lines, and you weren't seeing enough of a Jota, Diaz, and Gakpo doing that. They were all trying to ask the ball to their feet, and Liverpool weren't able to pick the passes to go through. That basically block four shape between Odegaard, Havertz, and then. And then Jorginho and Declan Rice, and it was an interesting tactic by Arteta. They basically didn't play with a striker, and it didn't matter because the way that Havertz was able to run and he was coming for the ball, he was doing well to kind of be an extra man in midfield, but also he was doing a pretty good job to just confuse Kanate and Virgil van Dijk where they were supposed to mark, who was going to be making the runs. Sometimes it'd be Martinelli going through the middle, and and Havertz would actually go out wide. That was happening a few times, and this was yeah, Arteta got the better of Klopp, and that's just where it is. One of the first times where I think Klopp did get things wrong, and not having Nunez was big. Not having Dominic Szoboszlai, apparently he has some kind of hamstring issue now. That was kind of big, and so when I saw the starting lineup, I actually texted my mates. I said this is one of the weaker lineups that I think Klopp's played all year. I felt like Arsenal probably should be favored when I actually looked at the starting lineup. I thought it was pretty cheeky that he was playing Jorginho, to be honest, because it takes kind of the pressure off Declan Rice to be kind of the main creator, the main supplier in the middle of the field. You can allow Rice to be kind of a help man essentially, and Jorginho is always really good at finding a way to create some space for himself to always kind of be a number to keep the ball going. And Liverpool were really struggling when it came to trying to press Arsenal into mistakes. There's a stat actually that I saw that kind of that tells like the story of the game. And when you think back at how Liverpool played versus Chelsea, and all they were doing is getting Chelsea to turn it over, and that was they were able to just kind of create turnovers and then attack for fun. Liverpool only won the ball back in the final third once in this game, and that was just they didn't know who to press. Gakpo and Gravenberch were really struggling, and Jorginho and Havertz were kind of at the heart of that. So, I mean, fair play. You have to give it up for them, and I think it was just kind of the perfect mix of just players being unavailable, and I think in Trent's case, not necessarily being able to handle, I guess, Martinelli or coming back maybe too early from uh, from injury. Dominic Szoboszlai was a massive miss as well. I mean, Bradley probably look at how Trent played. Bradley probably would have played had he been able to. So there was a lot of talk. If Trent's available, should Bradley be the starter again? I think the idea is yes. Uh, but Darwin Núñez not being able to stretch, that was a factor, and then not having a Szoboszlai, you actually saw for the first time that what he's been able to do to what he's brought to the lineup this season has it's kind of gone unnoticed. But when you think back, this was a position that was basically Jordan Henderson's for the last 2 or 3 seasons, and by replacing him with Szoboszlai, that position has gone from an area of great concern to an area of actual, like, real strength and quality. And with him being out, and Gravenberch, coming back in, or later it was Harvey Elliott in the second half, man, was that a weak point again. And so, there was a lot of talk maybe Alexis McAllister is signing of the season. It could be Slubberschlei. I mean, McAllister had a pretty good game himself. Kind of asked to almost kind of play midfield by himself. Curtis Jones, had an okay game. For the most part, they were just struggling to just kind of keep the ball, to be honest, because when they would beat Arsenal's press, where were they supposed to really go? A lot of it was just kind of sideways. Gakpo, Diaz, and Jota were just demanding the ball to their feet. It was just really annoying. It allowed Arsenal to play really high up, and maybe those few times when they were trying to go long, Saliba and Gabriel were somewhat handling it. So that was quite annoying as well. So it's just kind of a mix of Klopp not necessarily having who he would have preferred, and honestly getting the lineup and tactics all wrong, especially with because for the most part you understand the purpose is you had to defend Martinelli. You knew Trent versus him has been basically a bugaboo all every single time Trent's actually played him. Martinelli apparently has his best scoring record, I think they said, versus Liverpool, and so it was like they were like fake. They were fake doing it. Trent was still playing on the wing, but he just wasn't marking Martinelli. And what's kind of annoying is what we've seen for most of the season is Trent's kind of played in midfield, to be honest, and that's allowed the other kind of eights to be further up. And just I don't know if it was a mix of Gravenberch not really knowing his role, but he was kind of standing just basically like a statue. He wasn't doing anything without the ball. I don't necessarily want to do a whole podcast just going at him, but that was a big problem. And that was Liverpool's buildup was struggling a little bit with there. Where Trent's probably he's become his best when playing actually kind of centrally a little bit. And I think the only thing I was thinking about is this probably would have been. It sucks that Arsenal had to be the game without Connor Bradley, but had this been like a Europa game, or had this been maybe an FA Cup game, or someone I guess lesser competition, I guess I can say. I think the idea should have been playing Gomez at right back, uh, because Robinson was available. Playing Robertson, and then honestly playing Trent in midfield. But you probably don't want to do that the first game back, and especially if Trent only was on a minutes restriction, and basically he was just kind of nursing something, wasn't fully fit. Maybe it makes sense not to really do that either. But or the other thing could have been to actually play Trent in Mac's position and play McAllister. To be honest, as the number 8. I mean, Gravenberch just didn't work, unfortunately, and neither did the front line. Jota, Gakpo, or Diaz. And then I kind of mentioned what Arsenal did. Maybe another interesting tactic was because you had the midfield four with Jorginho, Rice, Odegaard, and or the box four and Havertz. Saka and Martinelli were basically your both your wide players, but also your strikers. But another thing was Zinchenko. Zinchenko is usually kind of a player that Liverpool will try to attack, similar to like Alexander-Arnold with Arsenal. And Zinchenko wasn't really coming into midfield and cluttering things up. He was doing a pretty good job to actually, stay on the wing side himself. And once he was, done with his duty, Arteta actually took him off and brought in Kiawar, and his job was kind of the same thing. They didn't need Zinchenko to dictate the game like maybe they needed it versus Nottingham Forest just a couple of weeks ago, or in the midweek, because they had that with Jorginho. And so it's really annoying how well or spot on Arteta you kind of got the setup. I mean, I don't necessarily want to go through everything, but I mean, there was a decent moment early on when Gakpo brought down a long ball, and Liverpool maybe should have done a little bit more. Plays Jota into the box, and Jota's touch is just too heavy. Otherwise, I think he actually scores 30 seconds into the game. And then there was a McAllister through ball, really good through ball that found Gakpo, and Gakpo gets a good strike on it, but and he gets it on target, but and it just feels like he probably if he gets it on target, I think he does score. And but the only thing is, these were good plays by Gakpo, and we just didn't see enough of it. If he's going to lead the line, I don't want him, dropping back and looking for the ball. I want him to kind of play like Nunez. It doesn't seem like he. There's no reason why he can't learn to be as aggressive and to be, to be an outlet over the top. The way Nunez is, it's not like Gakpo struggles with pace. It's just weird how he likes kind of dropping in and kind of being like a number 10 kind of player. Uh, I mean, that was that was just unfortunate because you saw what he can do when the ball is over the top. That's actually how Liverpool get their lone goal in the game, which I'll get to. But yeah, 8 minutes in the game, you can see where the problems are. Liverpool look a mess. Trent's playing really high and wide on the touchline, and usually, like I said, usually he's near McAllister to provide an option in their build up. So Liverpool were really struggling with their build up. And another problem was Gravenberch was just standing looking for the ball, not doing anything, and wasn't really helping when it came to out of possession either. So I mean, Liverpool would have say McAllister is under pressure and he's looking for some kind of outlet, some kind of option. It looks like maybe Trent's guarded, but with Gravenberch not really moving at all, it didn't really feel like he was ever really open. And by him not really moving and just standing still, what Gakpo would drop in, all Gakpo was doing was he'd be bringing a defender with him, and then all of a sudden Gravenberch would be marked as well. That was happening a lot too. So just the off ball movement was quite annoying with both the front three and some of the midfielders. And so immediately you saw Bradley kind of being missed. Bradley I think would have been better defensively versus Martinelli. That probably would have taken him out a little bit. That would have at least saved Kanate's legs a little. Uh, and then you saw with Sloboslai being missed and Salah as well. Just that entire right side was Liverpool's weakness, and for the most of the season, it's been really their strength. So I mean that again, I don't necessarily have to melt down about it too much. It is what it is. Uh, in the fifth minute, there's a pretty good chance for Arsenal. Just Martinelli crossed the socket. Probably could have been a little bit more. They actually maybe Liverpool got lucky that they didn't get this kind of goal. It's an early warning sign, though. This just comes from Liverpool having the ball. Diaz is in a pretty good area, but there's no one really making a run in front of him, so they attack stalls. Gomez later flicks in a weak cross that Raya catches, and then basically he's able to feed in Martinelli. Martinelli is already in front of Trent, and then basically the sprint is on, and he just blazes past Kanate. Then Martinelli then gets into the box, has a pretty good cross into the box, and uh, I think Gomez just puts off Saka a little bit, but Saka nearly heads this in, and just 5 minutes into the game. And then there's another early chance for Arsenal, and it comes from Alexander Arnold just being weak on the ball. He loses it. Martinelli presses him, and then basically Allison I think has a weak pass that kind of leads to this a little bit. Odegaard has a pop inside the box, and it's just kind of blocked off. But again, the lack of the threat to go long and then to push Arsenal's lines back was a problem. And so Arsenal were able to cause Liverpool's problems out of possession, and it was the exact opposite for Liverpool. So the pressing structure was some of the worst it's been in a long time, and I don't. Again, it's hard for me not to just single out a couple players, Gakpo and Gravenberch. It didn't feel like they knew what their role was, and so there'd be times when Jota and Diaz would try to put pressure on the ball themselves, but it wasn't a team or collective effort from the attacking players, and so it would be pretty easy for Arsenal to be able to pass around it. And when you can do that, then you normally have, especially when you have when you have two players uh, you know, going to the ball and then you pass around them, you have the numerical advantage elsewhere on the field, and you see that basically for the goal. Jota is running by himself. Gakpo and Gravenberch are just standing in quicksand. Arsenal can easily pass it around Jota, and then they find Jorginho, who isn't really being marked tight by Curtis Jones or McAllister. McAllister doesn't know what to do either. Jorginho then quickly passes it to Havertz. No one knows where he comes from, and Havertz drops for the ball, and then Havertz plays it back to Gabriel, who then finds Zinchenko. So by doing that, in the beginning, I think it's Trent Alexander-Arnold is marking Zinchenko, or maybe it's Gakpo. Someone is marking Zinchenko, doing a decent job. But when Havertz comes in, that brings Gravenberch to go to Havertz, and then Havertz passes it to back to Saliba, and then Saliba quickly passes it to Zinchenko. So by that little movement by Havertz, that feeds Zinchenko open, and that forces Trent Alexander-Arnold to then have to make a decision. Does he leave Martinelli or does he go to Zinchenko? And he tries to do that, but he's late. Zinchenko does a really good job to then find Odegaard in the middle of the field, and now there's the problem. Uh, Kanate now has to worry about Martinelli because the ball over the top is probably on. So he is really worried about that. Gomez has Saka making a run, and behind him, he has to be worried about that. You don't know where Odegaard is going to go with the ball, and then out of nowhere, Havertz turns around, and he becomes the option. And it's that one, like, weird, it's that split second where, it seems like McAllister has Havertz, but then McAllister wants to go to Odegaard when he gets the ball, and just this comes at the just the opportune moment for Arsenal, and if Odegaard takes a touch or if he's late on the pass, I don't think this is a goal. But Odegaard just one times it perfectly, and Van Dijk is kind of lost out of the picture. Konate is worried about Martinelli and not worried about Havertz. Havertz comes out of nowhere, and Havertz gets in on goal. And the only thing you can say is maybe he should finish. Allison's able to save it, and but basically, he saves it right to Saka, able to, with the wide open net. Uh, you maybe Gomez could have run to Saka instead of Havertz because if but it is what it is. I mean, it's a good goal. It's good. It's well worked by Arsenal. And then in the 40th minute, I have Liverpool starting to put some better passes together. Alexis and Curtis are somewhat keeping the ball, so that's better than somewhat winning their duels. McAllister, I thought, well, if there was one player to maybe have their head up, it was McAllister. He was quite good again, winning the ball back, but also playing some really good through balls into attackers, and just the shots weren't falling. Gakpo and Jota. I think they only had one shot all game, to be honest, and they were messing up their chances in the box. Just when Liverpool were able to actually have Arsenal kind of penned in a little bit, there was no real chemistry there. No one was really making any moves, and for the most part, Liverpool just forced to have some hopeful crosses and into really no one. It was quite poor. And then right out of nowhere, right before halftime, they were able to get back into the game 1-1. And it comes with Allison going long, and Gakpo does really well here. I think he's got Saliba or someone on his shoulder, and Gakpo is able to bring this down, and then he has some good physical presence to keep the ball. And then he picks out a Gravenberch, and I can praise Gravenberch for here because he does do pretty well here. He gets the pass and has a lovely weighted pass into the box that Diaz is running onto. So finally, we have some runs off the ball, and but even then, it looks like Arsenal actually have this covered. But Diaz sticks with it and outmuscles Saliba, and he's able to basically get the ball to poke it off Gabriel to deflect into the net. And the halftime thought was, man, did they scam a goal late? That didn't really feel deserved. I thought Trent Alexander-Arnold was ghastly bad. That was kind of the note I had. Gravenberch, I thought, was getting bullied, offered 0 runs without the ball, being stagnant, wasn't really offering any duels. It was, he was losing the ball as well. Gakpo, I didn't feel like he understood his role either. And again, they're just missing ways to push Arsenal back. And that's the surprise thing was Liverpool were able to beat Arsenal in the FA Cup because of that specific tactic, and they weren't able to repeat that. And then the notes I had for Arsenal were Liverpool were allowing Arsenal to feed balls into Martinelli to get into foot races with Konate. So credit for Arsenal recognizing that, maybe recognizing that Trent was going to be another weak point, but also the way that Jorginho was just moving the ball around to find players for fun, and Declan Rice was winning the ball back constantly. Rice had one of his better games, and I normally am one of the more critical of critical people of him. I couldn't really go with him this game, and again, it could be different. I don't necessarily know if Arsenal can play this way, say in the midweek versus Nottingham Forest, because they played without a striker essentially. But basically, the game here was just finding a way to keep control of the center. And they did a very, very good job of that. And they just kind of figured they could take their chances, just going out wide, trying to get past Liverpool's back line. And yeah, again, it was a pretty good game plan. Uh, and then in the 55th minute, Arsenal do have a chance. It's Odegaard having a shot. It kind of deflects out of bounds, but it's another example of just how broke Liverpool's pressing structure is. Arsenal are playing 1-2s around Gravenberch. He's just running in a circle, looking dejected. He keeps wondering where the help is. McAllister doesn't want to leave his holder area, and Gravenberch is kind of forced in a 2v1. And then again, Havertz just slips past Alexander Arnold in the box, and is a terrific ball sent in by Jorginho. And I don't necessarily think Havertz or someone like a Declan Rice would have done this ball. So that's another reason why having Jorginho on it instead was beneficial. And then Havertz chopped inside. Odegaard was able to get the ball, and he has a shot. It's just deflected. Uh, Not a ton though was happening for either side. The second half was somewhat uneventful and until basically this kind of happened. So first, there's a long clearance by Arsenal, and Havertz is in the area, and he's basically wrestling with Konate for positioning. And Konate is actually struggling a little bit with this, and basically both have their arms around each other, but Konate is maybe a little too physical, and he gets called for the first caution. But it is really good skill by Havertz. I don't think someone like Jesus is able to do that. And this kind of a physicalness from him as maybe the first I've seen from him all season. And then the subs kind of came for both teams. And so Klopp took Alexander Arnold off. I wanted him to stay on and play midfield, but maybe he wasn't fit. Gravenberch came on, but it was Harvey Elliott that came on, and Harvey Elliott at least tries to do a little bit more, but he struggles with physicality in games like this, and he basically he didn't know what to do. And Gakpo coming off, I thought was maybe a mistake. I like the idea of Nunez coming on. It would have been nice to maybe see Gakpo stay on, but Klopp kind of did like for like there, and then Gomez shifts to right back, Robertson on at left back. And, the only the it was good to maybe see Trent come off, at least might not be the right back, so you had Gomez to at least do something with Martinelli on the wing, but unfortunately, Arteta saw that, and basically what he did was he moved Martinelli to actually be, through the middle, and it was Havertz that was starting to make some runs out wide, and that's basically where the second goal comes from, but, Arteta also took off Zinchenko for Kiwior. And again, it was the kind of game where you didn't really need any kind of control by Zinchenko. You had that with Jorginho, and then the next two things that come away are good for Arsenal. So we have the first PK shout. It's the so Gomez gets caught out of position, and I think it's just like it's, Trent losing Martinelli. Martinelli is able to see Havertz making a clever run, challenging Kanate, and Kanate doesn't even run back. It's McAllister, and I was kind of surprised that they even looked at this on VAR. I thought this was actually kind of close to being given because McAllister somewhat gets the ball, but he has to go through the leg to get it. It's slight contact, and they said there's a coming together. The only thing you can say is Havertz maybe has a clunky touch, and that's maybe what gives the leeway. But this was close. I mean, it looked like Havertz was actually in on goal. And then so Liverpool got lucky there, and they didn't hear. And Liverpool's goal was kind of fluky, and this was kind of too. So this one kind of canceled it out. So the incident happens. Liverpool are trying to press 3v4. Arsenal play it out to Gabriel on the wing. No one near him. Diaz tries to close down, but it's too late. Long ball floated in the air. It looks like Van Dijk is running with Martinelli, and he allows it to bounce, and then looks like he'd still do something, and maybe it takes a weird bounce, and Van Dijk sees Allison coming out. I'm assuming Allison said he called for it, and but instead of dealing it with himself, he tries to shield Martinelli for Allison to just kind of boot it away. But what happens is Allison is trying to kick it, and Allison jumps and hits Van Dyke and kicks Van Dyke instead and misses the ball entirely. And the ball just falls to Martinelli. Open goal, and probably the easiest goal he'll score in his career. And we'll see how the rest of the season goes. But I mean, my thought did go. This feels Gerrard slip esque. Unfortunately, it's a massive howler of a mistake, and the worst time to do it, and the worst game to do it, other than like Man City. Uh, and then after Arsenal got their advantage, they changed it up. Instead of they basically just decided to drop deep, and they asked Liverpool to break them down. And this is where Klopp taking off Gakpo and Alexander Arnold really did bite him, because when Arsenal were in their blocks, Liverpool weren't able to really do anything. They weren't able to have any mismatches. They weren't able to, other than have helpful crosses into Nunez, and they were able to get Nunez in behind one time, and he had a good lash on the ball, but he missed it near post. And then Kanate picked up his second yellow. I think this is kind of weak. I mean, Elliott tries a weak cross to no one. Arsenal defended, and then basically they defended actually any kind of ball in the air really well. Their center backs, Martinelli. I mean, not Martinelli. Gabriel made a mistake, maybe on Luis Diaz, but for the most part, he had a pretty good game. Saliba as well. Saliba also kind of made a mistake a little bit on the Diaz goal, but in the air, they were both fantastic. Any kind of cross sent in, it's felt like they were winning it. Any kind of corner kick, Liverpool had a lot of corner kicks. But it felt like they were winning them as well. And then here, Havertz was able to slip past Elliott or slip past someone, and then he's trying to slip past Kanata and basically runs into him. It's not much different than what Gabriel did to Nunez a couple minutes before this. Gabriel was on a yellow too. That was allowed, but this one, I guess, what wasn't. But it is what it is. It is borderline. I didn't feel like it was a howler by Anthony Taylor. I mean, Kanate rocks that line sometimes. He got it away with Everton, didn't get away with it here. Kiwior nearly made it 3-1, and then Klopp took Gomez off to bring Thiago on. Luis Diaz becomes Liverpool's right back with Elliott as the RCM. and basically Trossard just kind of probably laughed at that, and Trossard's able to run past. I think it's Elliott and maybe and Diaz, and basically he's able to. All he has to do is beat Van Dyke to a sprint to get a shot off, and Van Dijk is maybe hesitant to engage. Maybe he thinks the cutback is on. Maybe he probably feels like Allison has this, and Trossard's able to squeeze it by Allison, and Allison has one of his poor games in a Liverpool shirt. And but you can't. I mean, the game was already over. This was like in the 90th minute. Didn't feel like Liverpool were ever gonna get a chance to draw it anyways. So this was kind of window dressing. But at the same time, credit to Arsenal. This is what they deserved. It felt like they probably should have won that FA Cup game, and they didn't necessarily not like Liverpool outplayed Arsenal in the first leg either. There was maybe their decisions in that December game. Odegaard, having the handball, not being called. Trent Alexander-Arnold did hit the post, but for the most part, it felt like Arsenal were somewhat comfortable in that game, outside of those chances as well. And so, given how the play went out, given how the game went out, played out, you can't say they weren't really deserving winners. But I think the note I had was the real winner of the game was Man City, unfortunately, and it was bittersweet. It felt like for the first time we really did see Klopp get things wrong, but at the same time it was also who they were missing. Arsenal with 3.5 xG, Liverpool 0.37. That kind of says it. 10 shots and one on target. Arsenal 15 and 7. Six big chances for them. 41% to Liverpool's 59, but that doesn't really tell the story. Arsenal with 304 passes, 78%. Liverpool with a few more, 444, 84%. But again, that Liverpool were kind of Arsenal were allowing Liverpool to have the ball in that second half, so that kind of plays a role into that too. So the kind of notes I have is Arsenal with the box four playing Jorginho, recognizing Alexander Arnold being the weakness, and the defenders and Rice just owning their duel battles. Only McAllister, I think, for Liverpool was quite good in his duels, and uh, there's a reason to give a shout out to Havertz, because I do feel like it was maybe his best game, and he maybe probably should have scored that one chance when he was through on goal. He maybe could have done better when he was actually in on goal, and when McAllister was able to catch him. He almost drew a PK either. He's the reason why Kanate was sent off. He drew both yellows. He was good, and the only thing, when you're not really asking him to provide you goals, but can do other jobs. He was helping with spacing. He was contesting duels in the air. He can do a job. And again, so I don't really know how feasible this is to play him in multiple games, when Arsenal are in that deep block, when you have that quote unquote field tilt situation. This isn't going to work because they literally were not playing with a striker. But in games when there is space in behind, and when your job is to kind of clutter the midfield instead, you actually saw a little of what he can do, and you saw Arteta's kind of I guess idea from the summer kind of play out in real time. And the other thought I was thinking about, I texted my brother this, is when you think of who Arsenal are probably going to be matched against in the Champions League, it might be situations like this, and might not necessarily be times when they're up against necessarily a deep block. It'll be against teams that want to play too. This could be a way for Arsenal to advance pretty far in the Champions League. That could be a storyline as well. I don't necessarily know how much I think Arsenal are going to, win the league. Maybe they do. That would be kind of a story too, because I've kind of been doubting them the entire year, and that's kind of, it feels like Arsenal and Arteta like that little storyline, like that underdog narrative. But the other thing too is I can see them maybe making a Champions League final, and we'll see what happens with that. I mean, the question is how far can they go without really having a goal scoring striker? Uh, but we'll have to see. I mean, if Martinelli can play like this, maybe you won't need it. And Saka's starting to heat up for them again as well. Though at the same time, he's also playing every single minute, and Arteta still needs to figure out a better way to do that. Uh, but another thing too is ugh, how how many games can Arteta dispatch Jorginho in this kind of manner? Because the reason why this was different than what we've seen in other games is Declan Rice wasn't being asked to basically uh, control the game. Declan Rice was being asked to do stuff without the ball. essentially. Now, when you get Thomas Partey back, maybe he can do this job as well. But Jorginho was really kind of the heart and why this was different than what we've seen. So I mean, I still have questions about if their open play is necessarily good enough. When I mean, because when Liverpool were in good defensive positions, it wasn't really like Arsenal were able to break them down. Uh, but it doesn't matter because Arsenal were able to create those transition moments, and man, did they make those count. So it was very weird because a lot of conversations leading up to this had Arsenal, uh, ugh, sorry, had Arsenal saying they had to win this game, and I didn't necessarily disagree, but it was everyone was saying because of Liverpool. I think it's because of Man City. If you need to, keep the pace with them, you need to win pretty much every game as well. So I thought that was kind of weird. Um, it was a game of fluke goals, but Liverpool looked pedestrian. So Arsenal were good in that respect as well. And I think weirdly enough, it's not these kind of games where people should question Arsenal. They beat Man City at the Emirates as well, kind of a similar kind of fashion by playing Jorginho and Declan Rice and asking Declan Rice to do a bit of a different job. And it's those games when you can get Martinelli and Zaka in space to operate when you can kind of see them uh, tick again. But the other thing I was thinking about is, and I don't know how to do this, but Arteta needs to figure out a way to get Trossard on the pitch more without exporting you defensively because he's probably their best clinical finisher. And I don't necessarily know how feasible that is. It can't just be placing Martinelli and uh, and uh, and Trossard because it just feels you're kind of losing because you're losing the kind of speed and the runs that Martinelli offers. So I don't really know how you do it. And the other thing too is how ooh, ooh, how much can Havertz repeat this? And then with Liverpool, it is what it is. I saw fans trying to say calm down. They only lost 2 games, but at the same time, I think it was like ESPN FC. They were wondering should Liverpool fans be worried? And not to overreact, but I think the answer is yes. And maybe it's not for the reasons that are obvious. I just think their depth has been greatly exaggerated. When you don't have Nunez, especially when you don't have Salah, you don't really have players to stretch the back line. When you don't have Slabashly, that number 8 becomes kind of iffy too. Now maybe McAllister can play there with Endo being back. I don't really know where Thiago necessarily fits. I kind of like Curtis Jones now, to be honest. I don't really know where Gravenberch fits at all. I don't really like Elliott necessarily, being played in midfield in these kind of physical games. Now, in the games when Liverpool have the ball and Elliott can kind of be a little final third kind of clever player, sure. But it was games like this where he was really, really struggling. And that was, I mean, maybe the idea could be Gravenberch in midfield, or honestly, it should be Trent. That needs to be the idea, to be honest. With Gomez back, Gomez or Bradley, on the right back, with Robertson back, Robertson left back. That can be maybe the thing. I mean, they're not going to have Kanate versus Burnley coming up, so but they do have Kwanzaa. At least I would be a little concerned if Kwanzaa hadn't shown to be quite stellar. And I think actually Kwanzaa even played versus Burnley in the first game. So we'll have to see how that works out. I mean, the lack of being able to win the ball back compared to what we saw versus Chelsea was really the story. I think some of that was Jorginho just being brilliant on the ball. He was quick to get it out of his feet, and anytime it felt like Liverpool maybe had a TV1 situation, he was able to get out of it. So that was really annoying. But at the same time, as good as Arsenal were, I do want to get this thought out. I've seen Liverpool play this way this season. It was in a Europa game. I think it was versus Union Saint Gerard in Europa League. And it was when Gakpo was played at F9. Nunez didn't play this game or didn't start this game. Gravenberch played in midfield. And we saw the same kind of problems in that game as we saw in this game. So I think it was basically a case of that, a case of personnel. Um, I mean, Konate and Van Dyke mistakes aside, I mean, I actually think Kanate's legs possibly just got tired by having to do all the track and back end running. So that maybe kind of played a role in some of this as well. Gravenberch and Elliott were yikes. And just neither seemed to be able to run and out physical teams or win duels. I mean, it was Elliott can move the ball quickly enough, but he can't really do a lot to win it back. At least we saw here, and Gravenberch has never really seemed like a Klopp signing of a player. He seems like a project, and he's a 6'2" project, so he has a good body, But if he can't, he's a liability out of possession, and so he needs to learn how to run. And if he can't, he's not. I mean, maybe he'll work with a different manager, but I don't know. This is the other note I have is this attack only goes when Darwin Nunes can go. At least when Salah's not being available, and that's for reasons I've explained as well. And I mean, funny enough, I was thinking, oh, this is good because Virgil van Dijk is in this game. He wasn't able to play in the FA game, and that was kind of the reason why Arsenal were quite dominant there. And unfortunately, Van Dijk kind of has the mistake here, but he's owned up to it. I like that he did that. Uh, Sometimes you'll hear people saying we got to do better when really it's you, and he actually said no, it is my mistake. So I do like that. I'm good veteran leadership. It's a reason for someone to rally around again. So they should be okay. It's not. It really isn't the end of the world. They still somewhat control their destiny, but the the space to make a they've limited to what they can do as far as any more further drop points. I can't think of my words. Um, and so and the other thing too is they actually have dropped a lot of points this year versus the quote unquote big six sides. They already they drew Arsenal at Anfield. Uh, they they drew Man City already. They've gotten a lot of draws. They lost Spurs. There's reasons into that, but it is what it is. They were able to at least beat Newcastle, and they drew Chelsea the first time, and were able to at least beat them in the second leg. Uh, we'll have to see. And they drew Man United, so it hasn't they have been leaving some points out there. They don't only have two losses, but they do have I think it's like six draws. So the room for error is very no more. And so especially when you have ooh, yeah, sorry, I'm a little out of it. Ah, especially when you have Man City looking like they did versus Brentford, and they go on to win uh, 3-1. And I mean, Marpoli gets the first goal, so there's something there. Funny enough, Phil Foden had the show. He has a hat trick, and I think the interesting thing here is Man City typically kind of struggle, or they have struggled lately with Burnley. And maybe Pep went into that thinking, "I'm not gonna do that anymore." It's also the only team that Holland hasn't scored against, which I thought was interesting, but the lineup Pep went with was wild. It got reaction online, and you were wondering, "How is this going to work?" Because Rodri played by himself, essentially, and you had Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne, Alvarez, Foden, and Holland all together. And you don't really have any kind of traditional wingers here. You basically have, four amazingly creative, attacking-minded players, and then Holland, and then I guess you were getting Walker and Grivaldi all to also kind of be your makeshift wingers, but at the same time, the idea is they have the pace to be able to make those runs in behind and recovery if they need to. And they were just asking, Diaz and Ake to handle, Ivan Tony, 1v1 on the back end. And I guess it was a situation where Pep did something different. He didn't. He normally goes into games where he doesn't want to have transitions against him. He wants to try to prevent any kind of clean sheets. And basically, he went in with this mindset, picking this kind of lineup where it was almost like he was like, "We're going to score 3 goals, and we'll see if they can match it." Essentially, because they were vulnerable at the back end. Brentford weren't bad in this game. I don't think the scoreline is necessarily an accurate reflection of what it was. And Brentford went with a couple of changes themselves. They went with Reguilon getting his first start, and I thought Reguilon was quite good. And then because one thing you saw was Brentford were passing from the back a little bit more. They weren't just going long. I mean, they get the lone goal by going long, and Tony actually does a little bit of a pick play, which is kind of unique. And then Maupay is able to have a nice little finish. But I thought Brentford were trying to play play from the back, trying to find some feet, and the few times when they were able to get some passes together, get behind Rodri, Man City were vulnerable. And again, I don't think Pep's going to do this lineup a lot. No, I mean, usually we see either Rico Lewis or it's Ben Kovacic, Mateus Nunes. We've seen a different kind of, or it's John Stones. We've seen someone next to Rodri in most situations. Here, they allowed They said, Rodri, do it yourself, essentially. Diaz and Ake were trying to kind of be next to Raji, but at the same time, their idea was to kind of mark Tony themselves, and Tony would go out wide, and the idea would be Walker having to deal with that. For the most part, he did okay, but Tony did also get some chances. Gavardio likewise. And it's funny, City fans were actually screaming because Gavardio maybe could have done better when he was able to get into the final third. But defensively, he was quite good as well. You don't really remember any kind of attacks going down Gravardio's side, and for the most part, it didn't really feel like. Brentford were able to get that first goal lead, but at the same time, you looked at before it got to halftime, even before Phil Foden got his goal. Man City had forced Flecken to make 8 saves. It was quite annoying. They were shooting on fun. They had 25 shots in the game, 15 on target, which was just mad. Uh, 3 big chances apiece, so that shows Brentford were able to create something themselves. It felt like, maybe if halftime had ended a minute before, maybe Brentford go into the game with a different mindset. But right before halftime, Kevin De Bruyne just floats in just a hopeful ball into nothing. Pennick's been defending all game. Maybe he's just tired. I don't really know, but he tries to head it back, and it's a weak header. It heads it right to Foden, and Foden just collects it and is able to finish. And it was quite annoying because Brentford had done everything you would have really wanted to. Yeah, they allowed 8 shots on their goal essentially, and they had a lot of blocks themselves. But for the most part, they were making City struggle. City were having to cross the ball a lot. I think I saw they were 3 for 15 crosses in that first half. Kevin De Bruyne was weirdly kind of going uh, away from the goal, which is where you want him to go. Uh, oh, uh, to make a like Phil Foden and Alvarez kind of worked out. Kevin De Bruyne was having to go where the space was. Sometimes he was going out wide and actually kind of being their wing option instead. And so if you're a team, you want that. You want De Bruyne to be away from the goal, not necessarily near it. It almost felt like the system was made for Phil Foden to have kind of his little free roll, uh, to be uh, to be an option kind of in around the box and to make those count. Not necessarily De Bruyne, and he did. He gets his hat trick. Uh, so those were kind of the general thoughts. I don't really think they can necessarily do this every game. And another thing to say is Alvarez is a very annoying player. There was a lot of talks thinking that it would be Alvarez or Foden to kind of have to take a back seat, which Kevin De Bruyne returned because you have Holland as well. You wouldn't expect City to be able to play this kind of way. They had Bernardo Silva kind of being on the right side, but really he wasn't. He was just kind of a makeshift kind of player too. It seemed like he basically had a free roll. Sometimes he would when Kyle Walker would be the winger, Bernardo Silva was actually going back and kind of being the right back. Uh, so there was just a lot of that. There was a lot of positional rotation, I guess you can say, and that's been kind of a theme or a knock against Pep in the past, where it seemed like he was very rigid in his positional I guess awareness or kind of philosophy. Uh, that's actually been kind of the heart of his like tiki taka style at Barcelona. Everyone just had a set kind of position. Here you saw a lot of rotation. And it did leave them a little exposed, at times, but for the most part, they could have scored any number they really wanted, to be honest. Flecken did make some pretty good saves. You're gonna get 15 on target, you're gonna win every game, and it honestly feels like they're about to do that again. But speaking of Alvarez, it feels like this guy gets whenever he gets a shot off, it's on target every single time. He gets good whip on it too. And again, a different day, if Flecken isn't quite good, he's maybe the one getting the hat trick. So that is annoying. And Everton on the weekend, and I won't really hold my breath, but at the same time, it is the early game, so we sometimes it is at Man City ground, but it is the early game, and Everton did give them a bit of a trouble a little bit back in December. Everton are kind of desperate a little bit. That'll be a game where City have 80% of the ball, and maybe Everton have 2 shots all game, and we'll have to see if they can make those 2 shots count. Uh, but no, obviously a really good week for City to get Foden's having a hat trick. It was weird how Holland was almost kind of the decoy. They didn't really look for him at all. They created one chance for him all game, but it doesn't matter because again everything was kind of set around Foden, and Foden was able to deliver. I mean, something I can hold my hat on is the lack of clean sheets is interesting because but at the same time, yeah, it seems like Pep's going to go into this thinking they can score at will, and he's probably not wrong about that if he's going to pick a side like that. And then with Brentford, this was harsh because I did feel like it was this could have been a 2-1 kind of game, and that's where you expect that's where you like hang your hat on. Uh, they I thought they did a good job of actually pressing Ederson to be sloppy. There was like an 8-minute window in that second half where Brentford were winning the ball, deep in the City end, and City needed some blocks. They needed a block from Diaz to stop Norgard and Maupay from maybe equalizing. So I thought there were positives. This was better than what they showed versus in that second half versus Spurs because Brentford weren't really open like they were versus Tottenham last in the midweek. So I thought Reguilon was a positive. Reguilon wasn't able to play versus Spurs because he's still a Spurs player. Tony and Maupay is starting to develop some chemistry. I think Maupay is starting to actually get on a heater for them. He seems to be scoring every single week now. I thought Brentford were doing decent to win their 50-50 duels, and at times they were able to kind of make that midfield into a second ball kind of contest, and they were doing a decent job to be competitive in that situation. But at the same time, uh, and they were able to go from defending into counterattacks quickly. They were able to quickly go upfield, and that was Brentford in the past. And they're doing this without Embrema and without Wisa, and they're able to get some pretty good saves from Flecken. So there were a lot of positives, I think, from Brentford's perspective. And then so moving on, so that's Man City. Moving on to the other Manchester club is Man United and West Ham, and Man United have a very bizarre day. I don't necessarily know if it was you can categorize it as great, because they win 3-0, but again, West Ham probably could have scored 1 at least, maybe multiple. Rasmus Højlund gets it going, and then Garnacho with 2. Unfortunately for West Ham, the third one comes from bringing Calvin Phillips, their loanee, onto the field, and for the second game in a row, Calvin Phillips has a misplaced touch that basically directly leads to a goal. So he hasn't played in a while, and maybe he is rusty, but that is more than more than rust. That is just essentially because West Ham probably brought him in to maybe have some control in the game, to maybe allow Alvarez to get some rest, or maybe Alvarez to play somewhere else, and it's not worked so far. Uh, we'll have to see if it works better. But the other thing too is they had 22 shots this game, and only a few on target. Not a lot actually went created to Bowen. There was one chance when I think it's Alvarez. Alvarez has a great ball over the top. Bowen is in 1v1. He's just completely gone past Harry Maguire like he's not even there. And it's Diego Dallo that just comes out of nowhere and has an amazing stop. Dallo was quite good in this game, both that and also the stuff he did offensively. He kind of gives them a little more shape. He gets involved in their attack, but he's also not necessarily liable when they're trying to build possession from the back. Man United seem better when it comes to that now. Also, that's what happens when you get better players on the ball. Luke Shaw as well, Casemiro back, Lissandro Martinez back. All of a sudden, you were starting to see a little bit more of what we saw last season. The only difference was Harry Maguire back in the 11. And I think Ten Hag got lucky because there were more than a few times when I had West Ham having some chances and basically were saved. So here, I think Harry Maguire gets caught on the ball, and it's Emerson pressing him, and Emerson just completely has a free run at the goal, and he makes like a I don't know 70-yard sprint. And unfortunately for him, he's a fullback, he's a defender, he doesn't score, and he just blows it over the crowd instead. Anyone else, if this is Kudus, Bowen, probably a goal. So they got lucky there with Harry Maguire, and then there was another chance when I think Emerson. So let's see, yeah. So the problem here is all of their best looks come to really their fullback. So here it's a good move. So Alvarez carries it upfield. He then runs past Garnacho, and then he gets Dallo to commit, and then plays it to James Ward-Prowse before Alvarez is closed off. Dallo is flying at him, but that means Dallo is out of the play now. And then James Ward-Prowse is just able to carry it all the way upfield because Harry Maguire can't recover and run to him. Harry Maguire is worried about Jared Bowen in the box. And then finally, Maguire decides to engage late, and that's when Ward-Prowse lays it off to Emerson in the box, and he just flops it right to Onana. But those were situations, and then with the Dallo situation, as well. It looks like West Ham were able to. Jared Bowen was able to run behind Harry Maguire. So I thought that was I thought they were targeting him, to be honest, and now maybe we're lucky that West Ham weren't able to make more. They get the second goal with Garnacho, and another good move that Ten Hag has made over the last few weeks has been playing Garnacho on the right. It's allowed Rashford to be on his preferred left side, but what it's also done is it means no Anthony anymore, at least for the most part. And you see him score 2 goals in this game, one with his preferred, right foot, and then here he shows he does have a left foot, so he can play, inside if he needs to be off the right. So here we have a switch ball from Bruno into the box. He gets and then he chops it onto his left foot, and fires in a cracking shot that flies past the keeper, beating him near post. But it's really the deflection off a guard that beats Fabianski, but it's the power. It's the power on the shot. It's good whip on it. But Garnacho, when he gets the ball, isn't really being marked tight by Emerson at all. I think Emerson's just made a sprint 90 yards, and he's probably winded. So there's some of that, and yeah, Garnacho. Maybe he just didn't think Garnacho had a left foot to be able to do this. But this goal comes from the off the ball running from Luke Shaw and Diego Dallo. And so it's small, but Luke Shaw makes a run ahead of Bruno earlier in the move, and that drags the defender away from Bruno, and that basically allows him to get the ball into the box to find Garnacho. And then Diego Dallo kind of does the same thing. He makes a run into the box, it drags Suchek to follow him, and that leaves Garnacho to just have to deal with Emerson. So good running by those two. But at the same time, let's see. Everything was looking good for Man United, and then it got to around like the 65th minute mark, and Sufal and Lisandro Martinez are kind of battling for the ball near the byline, and Sufal kind of falls on Martinez's knee. It looks kind of innocuous, but apparently it's not good. It's not good for the defender who has missed a lot of the season this year, battling with a toe injury, and before that he broke something in a Europa game last spring. So Sandro Martinez has had to deal with a lot of games being missed, and we'll have to see how long he's necessarily out here. That's it's quite a disaster, to be honest, for Ten Hag, because I think their defense looks better when he's able to play. Now, you can maybe get some balls, you can maybe cross some balls into the box where he's not necessarily the best in the air, but what he is he's aggressive in a way that sometimes Man United's defense is not. And he can make those runs in behind as well, and he's not a liability in possession. He's quite good at being able to get around pressure and being able to find players. Sometimes seems Man United struggle with that. And so, if you're not going to play, I mean, Ten Hag does have Rafael Varane to maybe slot in, or it looks like Lindelof is back, so maybe we'll see him. I can't imagine he goes another game playing Harry Maguire, but I've been wrong on that. So we could see that. And then Garnacho gets the third. Uh, it's just Calvin Phillips kind of being rough on the ball, and I think it's McTominay. McTominay kind of pokes it off him, and then it's kind of the ideal situation because he had McTominay wins the ball. He's got options ahead of him, and he carries it into the box and then plays it to Garnacho, and Garnacho just is able to just pass it in. I mean, Man United 12 shots and 5 on target, 51% possession, 249. That's surprising. West Ham, weren't bad in this game, to be honest. 421 passes. That's a decent number for David Moyes. 87% accuracy. That's pretty good. West Ham played better when Alvarez is playing. That's something that I've noticed too. So I don't know. The only thing you can say is Moyes went in playing. I think it's Ben Johnson, who is like a fullback, as the right winger, kind of attacking player because they lost for options now a little bit with Paqueta being out. They played Kudus. They tried Kudus on the left in the beginning. That wasn't really working out. Kudus prefers being played on the right. At least that's what the commentator said. Jared Bowen through the middle, they weren't really able to get many looks for him, unfortunately. So you're missing Antonio and missing Paqueta. So, but for the most part, this was not bad. I mean, they've gone into the game. They've gone into like 3 or 4 weeks being quite pedestrian. They weren't. They were actually quite good this game. 22 shots, only 3 on target. That is where I mean, when your chances of coming to Ben Johnson and Emerson, that's not necessarily great. But with Man United to get started with them. It's big for Rasmus Højlund. He's starting to kind of get on a heater. Starting to it's 2 games in a row. He's gotten goals. I think the only thing you can say is they're still not really looking for him. He only had 2 shots all game, and I don't think he had a second shot after the I don't know 30th minute. They're doing a better job to at least get him touches, so that's good. But they're still not really playing through him. I mean, he created the goal all by himself. It's a beautiful goal. I didn't even talk about that. Uh, he gets the ball. I think it's like Casemiro. Casemiro wins the ball back and plays it to Rasmus. And he what he does is he fakes it like he's going to maybe shoot with his left foot. He gets Kurt Zuma to just go to ground and shifts it on to his right, and then he's able to a nice little feint in this as well, and then he's able to basically power it into the net. A keeper has no chance. And for someone that was maybe struggling for confidence in the beginning of the season, you don't do this if you're struggling for confidence. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he's got great power on his shot. He showed it here. He showed an amazing, powerful left foot shot to score for Spurs a couple of weeks ago. And it's just funny how like one all it takes is one chance to go in for the lid to the quote unquote lid to blow off, because you remember he went so many games without scoring, which never made sense because he had like 5 games out of like 6 in the Champions League. So yeah, he obviously he showed in the Champions League he can do it, but it took a while for him to get going in the league. I think his first goal did come against Aston Villa, and it was a big goal because that helped them beat Aston Villa. And since then, he's really gotten going for them. So that's positive. Garnacho scoring. Got 2 goals this game, and you're starting to see Rasmus and Garnacho get going for them. But that said, and Rashford scored versus Wolves. But that said, the attack's still not really looking for each other. There are a couple times when they're doing some 1-2s. I think Rasmus actually had a uh, a pass back to set up Rashford versus Wolves, but for the most part, they're still not necessarily combining, but at least they're scoring. Because for the longest time, Man United's attack was one of the 5th worst in the league. Uh, and defensively, it seems like they've gotten a little bit better, at least since Luke Shaw has come in and Dallo being played. Their fullback situation has gotten better. I was wondering a little bit about that, and I feel like Luke Shaw is he's secure in possession, but again, I feel like he gives Rashford someone to play off. I think they have a pretty good connection with each other. Uh, that was at least that was a hypothesis, I guess, or thesis of mine a couple of weeks ago. I was wondering why Man United were struggling, or at least Rashford specifically was struggling this season. And I was wondering maybe it's Luke Shaw being out, and we've seen a couple of games now where Rashford I feel like has looked better with Luke Shaw being back. So I'm going to credit that as being a win. Maybe it's bonkers or maybe it's nonsense, but I'll stick with it. And again, the only negatives is the Martinez injury and McGuire. McGuire's been weird with West Ham. The I don't know what you can say other than Calvin Phillips has been a flop of a loan signing. Maybe he'll get better. He went so many months without really playing. So that is what it is. It's crazy how he never really lost his England spot. So if he's rusty just after playing not many games, what was he going to look like if this had been an England call up? But he's got to get better when it comes to this, because when he was at Leeds, he didn't have this kind of issue. He was quite good at being under pressure, and he was quite good at picking people out. Um, and then the other thing I was thinking about is Maxwell Cornet needs to start for them next game. They need to, and they play Arsenal, but Ben Johnson isn't really an attacker minded player. They need to have people that can beat someone 1v1, that can cause hell to a fullback. Uh, because Bowen and Kudus isn't enough. You need a third attacker. So maybe we'll see that they do have Arsenal next, and that has been in the past, or at least this couple of seasons, that has been Arsenal's bogey team. Declan Rice hasn't been able to beat West Ham, but then I could be eating my words. This could be the first time to do it. Uh, I think the game is in London Stadium, and that'll be the big game on Sunday. So we'll have to see. Maybe Moyes can do me a solid, and then move on to Tottenham and Everton, which also gets Tottenham with going with 2 goals. Calvert Lewin gets one for Everton back. It's just a corner kick that Tottenham can't really deal with. That was kind of a theme all game. Vicario was really struggling in the air. And then a Breathwaite in the 94th minute, just a weak free kick given away by, I think it's Kulishevsky. Kulishevsky came on in the second half to maybe insert a little bit more control. Tottenham's midfield looked a mess the second half of the game, and I didn't know if it was because maybe Betancourt and Madison didn't have a lot of good chemistry together. Hoiberg was really struggling as well. They went into the game without Sarr. They were able to sub Sarr on later in the second half, but they were really struggling when it came to finding a way to to deal with Everton having some pressure on them. They were turning the ball over a way more than we normally see, and that was leading Everton to win the ball back, and then they would have some runs ahead of them. And for the most part, I thought I think I mentioned it before. I thought the runs were in. I thought there were a couple of times when there was like Jack Harrison was looked completely in on goal, and out of nowhere, Mickey Van de Ven came around and had an amazing recovery. And that was I thought Van de Ven was maybe player of the game, even though Richarlison had 2 goals. So that kind of says where the game was at. I mean, the headline going into the game was Tottenham did have a nervy game versus Brentford. It's worth kind of saying that, and Everton are capable of those long balls over the top and into wide channels. So I was wondering if maybe Everton could cause some problems before the game, and they weren't really going wide. They weren't really doing long balls into wide channels. They were just doing it in behind in general. But it seems maybe you can get at them a little bit other than or maybe you can't. Mickey Van de Ven was saying you can't. And then Everton have started to get into a situation where they need to actually start taking points every single game week. So just getting a point here is important, and we'll see because you're doing this without Decore. Decore has maybe been honestly their player of the season to this point. I think he's away to African Cup of Nations. I don't necessarily. I think it's in Mali. Mali might have actually lost, so maybe you'll get him back now. But this was a game where you didn't have McNeil and Garner as you kind of midfield two. It was Idrissa Gueye who was back, and Gueye and Garner did a fantastic job at making things hell for Tottenham. And the few times when they were able to get some runs ahead, Harrison was quite good at breaking, and so was McNeil. McNeil was doing a pretty good job as well, and it was a pretty good game plan by Sean Dyche. And with Spurs, kind of mentioned it before, we saw Betancourt and Madison together, but it was with Hoiberg, and Hoiberg did not necessarily have his best game. We saw Brennan Johnson get a start, so it wasn't Kulusevski was on the bench, and it was interesting to see Kulusevski come on to be in midfield for the second week in a row. And so that kind of showed they're a little weak a little bit now, and maybe Ange doesn't trust Oliver Skip. They're about to get Basuma and Sarr back, so that'll kind of change a little of this. And the other thing to say is a couple weeks now where we've seen Werner play a pretty big role for a couple of these goals. Yeah, he was kind of the man of the match in the second half. So was Udogie, for maybe the reasons he wouldn't have wanted to be, because Udogie was basically responsible for all the goals that happened in the Brentford game. Udogie and Werner were quite important for a couple of these goals that Tottenham scored. I think the first one actually comes from Werner first being the outlet, gets the ball out wide. He sees Udogie making a run into a channel, placing the ball before Udogie gets to the byline, and then Udogie has a cutback, and that finds Richarlison. And then for the second goal, I think it's also Udogie making a run. He's able to find Madison, and then Madison has a nice little clever touch that be able plays it to Richarlison, but Richarlison just kind of passes it in. That's kind of where the goals came from. The main thing to talk about though was the Everton on set pieces were just giving Vicario fits. And Everton are pretty good at set pieces, but it was maybe the first time we saw Vicario struggle. I thought. I mean, Everton outshot Tottenham 14-9, 5 on target for Everton and 6 for Spurs. Everton's xG was 2.5. Tottenham's was 0.9. Everton with 43% of the ball. That's usually what you expect. The passes was 245, so a low number for Everton, but that's kind of what you expect. That's kind of Dyche's ball as well. He's about getting the ball and being direct as possible. As a, why do you need to have 6 passes to get the ball towards the goal when you can do it with one? He's like giving a comment about that, or a quote about that in the past. Tottenham though 360 with 77%. That's a low passing number for Spurs compared to where they've been in past games. So that kind of says a little bit where their struggles were a little bit. And I mentioned the Van de Ven recoveries. It could have been a lot worse. But at the same time, they were so close to actually getting a point. Uh, but there were a couple. There are 2 ways to really look at this. I mean, because I saw a lot of doom on online a little bit about this. I think it was a couple games now with Madison and Betancourt. Maybe they're just kind of getting to know each other. Hoiberg, I think, is their 4th choice midfield when you get Bissouma and Sarr back. Lo Celso was something special versus Man City, and you've been missing him. They've been competitive without Son. You're finally going to get him after Asia Cup, you expect. So I think there's a lot to actually be encouraged by because they're still competitive. They're actually they had a chance to pass Aston Villa. I guess Aston Villa passed them, but they still have a chance to be in fourth. So the only thing I was wondering about is I think I like Brendan Johnson more as kind of a wide option, more of a third winger than Kulishevsky. And with Madison back, I don't necessarily know where Kulishevsky fits in this. Yeah, it seems like Ange is kind of struggling a little bit with that too. Kulishevsky can be quite good at being a ball to feet kind of player, but he is very left footed, and so he likes to cut inside. You're and you can see those situations where sometimes him and Madison are kind of clashing a little bit together. And it didn't feel like Kulishevsky was really flying in the beginning of the season with Madison. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like Brendan Johnson offers more pace and offers more runs on the wing than necessarily he does. And I think Richarlison benefits when you have someone like that. He's benefiting from those cutbacks into the box a lot. And that's another thing to say, which Allison really is on a heater right now. He's scoring goals for fun, and it's one thing to be a fox in the box. The second goal he scored was a beauty, and it's not easy to beat Pickford from distance. So that was he came back with vengeance against his former team, and I think Warner and Udogie are starting to have some pretty good 1-2 connection. And with Everton, we'll see what they have in store for Man City. I won't necessarily hold my breath, but we'll have to see. And then I'll go on to what was really the game of the day, game of the weekend, in Luton and Newcastle with eight goals is just is remarkable. Uh, Luton two games in a row with four. I mean, it got started with Longstaff. Longstaff was one of the bright spots also for Aston Villa. Starting to see more off the ball runs and runs into the box, and here's a good finish. And then Osha gets Luton back in the game, and then Longstaff again. So Longstaff has two, and then Barkley. Barkley, that'll probably be who I really speak about when I get to Luton Town. Barkley was amazing in this game too. Now he did have maybe the mistake for the Harvey Barnes goal, but other than that, he was spectacular. Carlton Morris with the PK caused by uh, Ogbeni just going past Dan Burn for fun, and then Dan Burn brings him down, and then Adebayo, which Ross Barkley gets the ball kind of at top of the box, and he actually has Adebayo just on his wide side, and again, Dan Burn doesn't really know where to mark, and he's just kind of caught in between two minds, and the ball gets to Adebayo, and Adebayo is able to put it in the net as well, scoring. That's now 4 goals in the last 2 games for Adebayo. But then Newcastle woke up. Trippier first with it's a really nice cross by Bruno, back post. Trippier is able to beat his defender to score, and then Harvey Barnes makes it the 4-4 all kind of game. With this is again, it's unfortunate because Ross Barkley loses the ball, but it's still Harvey Barnes has a lot to do. It doesn't really feel like this is a goal scoring opportunity, and he basically just wraps his left foot through the ball, and it's one of those like hard, low, kind of curling shots that just kind of doesn't really leave the post and just kind of creeps in. It's one of those things like Kevin De Bruyne would normally do. And what a way to reintroduce yourself a little again. I mean, what a goal this was. And so yeah, I'm trying to not run out of breath. I mean, Newcastle did have that really good performance versus Aston Villa, and there was a but though. The but was once Aston Villa brought on Leon Bailey. Immediately Aston Villa scored. They looked like they got in behind again with Watkins. Only that was ruled offsides. It felt like Dan Burn was an issue in that game, and that has been a bit of a theme for Newcastle for a lot of the stretch. Now they've been having issues as well as far as not having really good legs. They had a bunch of injury issues that kind of compounded on things. Trippier had that weird December stretch where it seemed like he couldn't kick anything right. But it was also Dan Burn. Dan Burn got burned by Anthony Alenga. I thought versus Nottingham Forest. He's been burned by a lot of people all season. And Dan Burn versus someone as Ogbeni has like world class sprinter speed. I think they've clocked him as the fastest player in the league. And it just you were just looking at it on like a lineup sheet before the game, and you're like, this is going to be a problem. This is a matchup nightmare. And Luton are really good at kind of finding those ways to exploit mismatches. They did the same thing with just with James Milner. It was like Carlton Morris versus James Milner in the air. So Eddie Howe kind of messed us up a little bit. You look on the bench and they had Livermento that was fit and good to go. You have Lewis Hall, who hasn't really gotten a game this season, who should have been good to go, and they probably would have done it a little bit better. And because it's one thing if you're getting caught out of position. Dan Burns in position, and they're just running past him still. So Newcastle have a. It's a bit like with Eddie Howe. Newcastle have a ceiling, or they've hit their ceiling essentially. There's a way to go up and breach it, and they have aspirations to do that. But I don't think you can do that with someone like him. I don't really like going at players negatively like that, though I have done with Harry Maguire. I do feel, and I have done that with Thiago Silva. Dan Burn reminds me he fits that kind of mold, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, just getting started. The first goal comes with Longstaff. It's just a long switch by Lewis Miley. I mean, that's another thing too. Newcastle playing a 17-year-old every single game week, and he looks a senior player. I mean, Lewis Miley is quite good for them. Uh, but then I think it like Trippier gets the ball and it's just like cut back into the penalty area that Longstaff finishes. And then they get the second one with Longstaff, and this is another good example of turning defense into attack. And here it's Anthony Gordon who he basically beats Osho for pace, and Osho then allows Gordon to chop back inside. He gets the ball on his right foot. The shot is saved, but it just falls to Longstaff. Um, Gordon does brilliant here, but also he's all alone. He has no help in the beginning. Newcastle are defending with everyone in the box. Almiron is kind of the player that picks out Gordon from inside the penalty area, and Gordon all alone just basically able to runs upfield and is able to create a goal scoring opportunity just by himself. So, and I did feel like it was fitting that Longstaff was kind of the hero of the first half because I thought he was quite good versus Aston Villa. And then I do want to talk about this goal, the second from Barkley, because Lokonga first feeds in a slip ball to pick out Morris, who had dropped deep. Morris has learned to be a better player without the ball, so he drops into a little bit a pocket of space in the final third, then plays a really nice pass to Barkley running behind him or beside him. And then here, Longstaff and Jacob Murphy are kind of in the same situation, but Barkley's able to beat Murphy and then Longstaff to a 50-50 duel. He keeps the ball, and then he's able to carry it all the way into the Newcastle penalty area, where he then plays in Alfin Dalfi in the box. Doughty's shot is saved, but the rebound falls to Barkley, and Barkley is able to has a good touch and is able to finish it off. It's kind of similar to Longstaff's goal. Uh, but so many good scoring opportunities can come when you can just get a runner with the ball options ahead of them. We saw that for the Man United and the third for Man United with Garnacho. When McTominay had the ball, he just had options ahead of him. You don't because that keeps a defender the defense from being able to run at the player with the ball. So you're allowed to actually kind of dictate what you want from the defense, and you saw it here. And Barkley was quite good again this game. And then the second half, it felt like it was going to be a Luton kind of story. I mentioned with the PK, it's Albany just places past Dan Burn like he's not there. Burn brings him down, and Carlton Morris then has to take two PKs. I thought that was kind of unfortunate for him, but it doesn't matter because he makes both. Uh, and then they get the fourth and insult to injury to Dan Burn, he has a sloppy pass in the beginning, so it's a cheap giveaway. Then Trippier kind of runs wildly to cause a turnover, but Bell of Luton sees it and plays the ball over the top for Alfie Dalfy to make a run unopposed, where Trippier has left the space. And then Barkley gets onto the ball at top of the box and draws everyone's attention onto him before slipping in Adebayo to his side. And Adebayo basically passes it in with a very smooth finish again. And at this point, it was hard to say Luton look a powerhouse, to be honest. But then Eddie Howe did so he got maybe the first half wrong. Did make some changes to make things right in the second half. So he brought Dan Burn off, brought on Livramento, brought in Harvey Barnes from Miguel and Almiron, and I think he had to. He had to bring off Anthony Gordon to bring on Callum Wilson, but Callum Wilson was offering a little bit more of a threat in the air, essentially, and for that, from this mode on, I want to say from like the 60th minute to maybe 80th or even 90th, maybe 80th. All of a sudden, Newcastle really took control in the game. They were significantly more aggressive in what they were trying to do, and Luton looked like they were maybe running out of energy. I mean, it's not easy to be able to play the way that they were doing. So I mean, maybe you saw the legs get tired. You saw Luton actually have to use all five of their subs, and it felt like the like for like or the like for like replacement wasn't the same. I mean, it's probably what you expect with a relegate or a promoted newly promoted side. Uh, that the bench isn't necessarily as good as the starters, but that is kind of what we saw. We didn't see necessarily once the second guys came on, Luton were not necessarily as good in possession. So you saw maybe them struggle a little bit with that. Maybe you didn't see necessarily the pace like you would have seen, but at the same time they did well to relatively stick back into the game after conceding two. But the two they do concede. So Trippier again kind of made a mess of things for the earlier one, but he makes amends here. Newcastle have a lot of pressure here. It's wave after wave of attacks, and eventually Bruno gets on the ball. He has a really nice floated ball into the back post that Trippier is able to finish. Carlton Morris is there, but it's just kind of a little late to react. And then the Harvey Barnes goal, which I've talked about, I don't need to say it again, but it is a fantastic goal by him. And then really, honestly, Bruno had a cross that flashed across goal that Murphy could have put away, was close. And then Luton had a very similar chance where Barkley played a terrific ball into the box that picked out Ogbeni. And Ogbeni made a darting run, and he nearly had a chance to put it away. He just hit it right at Dubravka. But in the end, a point felt fair for both teams. I mean, Newcastle with 54%, Luton 46, Luton with 301 passes. That's better than where they were in the beginning of the season, 81%. That's a lot better too. It's not 50. Newcastle with 308 and 73%. So the passing numbers do tell a bit of a story. Neither team was able to gain control to really kill the game off. Both teams were just flying and trying to win the ball back. It was a lot of high energy by both teams and high shots on target. I mean, 19 and 6 for Newcastle, and Luton with 11 and 8. 2.2 for Newcastle, and Luton 2.2. So that kind of tells the story too. Should have been. So I mean, both teams made a little bit better of their the situations than maybe they should have. So I will get started with Luton because I do feel like there are two ways to look at this. You could be disappointed to only just get a point after having a two-goal lead in the second half. At the same time, you did concede first. You're away at St. James's Park. It's not an easy place for any team to play. So I think the positive is after they do concede the two goals late, and it is a 4-4 game with 10 minutes, 20 minutes to go, they did a decent job to stay in the game and regroup. So I think there's some of that. I mean, the level of improvement that they've shown has been remarkable. Most promoted sides don't come into the league and press this way. That's something that you really saw versus Brighton as well in the midweek. Usually see promoted sides play like Sheffield, sitting back without the ball as their main source of defense, and they're as aggressive as a team as and brave on the ball. They take a lot of risk as really anyone. So pretty cool to see. And again, Ross Barkley, what a player he is. And I think I mentioned it last week. I'll say it again. England need to think about calling him up because Jordan Henderson, Calvin Phillips, and Conor Gallagher are not better than this guy. The he can control tempo. He does. So he's so good at recognizing how to play in between the lines passing, which is something that England often lack when I watch them play. I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to get into a starting kind of spot, but maybe he can come in and offer you 20 minutes off the bench. Maybe, yeah, in games when maybe it's 1-1 or maybe it's a deadlock. He has a good passing range on him as well. So if someone like a Saka or Rashford, someone making a run in behind, maybe it's Harry Kane making a run behind, he can pick him out. But another thing too is he's got slippery feet as well. So in the situations where you need someone to get by a man to create things as well, it feels like he can do that too. And he's not necessarily liably defensive. He's able to win a couple duels. Now he does have the mistake for the fourth goal. I mean that can happen. It is what it is. But I really like what I've seen from it. It's the perfect partnership with Sambi Lokanga as well. Lokanga offers a little more defensive security, but at the same time, what do England have? They have Declan Rice. So I kind of like the idea if Southgate is going to play with a pivot. Sometimes we've seen that. Sometimes he does a 4-3-3. But I think this should be something in his locker or something in his whatever you would call something with a bow and arrow like that kind of like shield. Something in his backpack. I guess I can't really think of it. Just as something to play in situations because again I think he offers a little bit more, especially with Calvin Phillips. But even Henderson, Henderson's come back from Saudi to go to Ajax because he wants to get into Euros. I think he should lose his spot. to someone like Barkley. Barkley showing that he can do stuff in the Premier League, and he's making players at Luton look better than players on Newcastle, players on Brighton. I think it's worth thinking about. And then Adebayo, Ogbeni, and Morris are starting to show that they can cause some mismatches and give teams a handful. And with Newcastle, you get Harvey Barnes back, so that's positive. That gives Eddie Howe another option to think about, especially with if Anthony Gordon is out for a little bit, you can maybe do that. Longstaff starting to provide some goals again, which is good because it looks like they're going to be without Joe Linton the rest of the season, and you don't really know how much you can rely on Lewis Miley to kind of pull everyone together. For the most part, they can play this way again too because they only have once a week football now. Trippier is starting to maybe benefit from that too. Maybe his legs are starting to get a little tired because he had a fantastic second half performance, as did Bruno Guimaraes. So the only negative is Dan Burn, which I mentioned. It's almost like Eddie Howe thought he could go on an island with Benny like he was Kyle Walker, and it was just I think Livermento needs to be thought about as the first choice option instead. If you're gonna maybe Denver can be like a center back option, even though you have Shara and Botman back. But Botman was struggling too. When Byrne was getting beat, Botman had to shift over, and Botman wasn't doing well with the pace that Benny had. Uh, I mean, yeah, it was so, and likewise with Luton, two ways to look at this. It can be positive to come from behind. Maybe you screwed up in the beginning, but recognized to take Dan Burn off, brought on Livramento, offered a little more security, maybe offered a little bit better in possession as well, because Dan Burn often doesn't really offer you any kind of runs either. So I thought the second half subs were good, to be honest. So we'll have to see what the injury is with Anthony Gordon, and then Chelsea and Wolves, and we'll see how we're doing for time. Probably not great. I can't really say. It's not too bad. Uh, this comes as a shock, but maybe it shouldn't. So, Wolves win 4-2. Chelsea get the first goal with Cole Palmer, really good Casado assist, and then Cunha kind of just has a little fun with first scoring with a deflection, and then gets another touch, or gets his Nuri gets a touch, and it's a Diazy own goal. But it felt like Wolves kind of earned that. Anytime that they were able to win the ball back and get Chelsea into a bit of a transition, Chelsea looked vulnerable every single time. And any kind of like 50-50 ball or second ball in midfield, it felt like Wolves were winning it. Wolves seemed to have more of the legs. And unfortunately for Chelsea, that's been a bit of a theme that I've kind of noticed when I do watch them. Uh, but it was just a 2-1 game going into halftime, and then Cunha just be able, Neto just takes on uh, Thiago Silva for fun on the wing, and it has a cutback ball to Cunha, and Cunha is able to finish, and then Cunha basically, honestly, does the same thing to Milo Gusto, and this is actually honestly more impressive. It's one thing to get by Thiago Silva, but Cunha sizes up Marlo Gusto and basically shows him that the ball, and he basically says, "I'm going to beat you to from the touchline to the penalty area." And Gusto is just a second to react late, and Cunha beats him, and then Gusto brings him down, and that's where Cunha gets the PK, and then Thiago Silva with the one late. Um, if you were looking for a rebound after the Liverpool game, you didn't really see it, unfortunately. And Nkuku got his first start. Gusto was positive. I mean, Carlo Chukwuemeka, at least versus Liverpool, was positive. We didn't really see him in this game. And then with Wolves, how were they going to rebound versus Man United? And man, did they! Also having to come from behind after scoring, after conceding first. So I don't necessarily want to go over a lot of the goals, but the stats do kind of tell a little of the story. I mean, Wolves didn't have a lot of the ball, 36%, but anytime they were able to have transitions, it was on. Nine shots and only two on target. That's kind of funny. I mean, a couple of those deflected in, so there can be some of that. I mean, there was some kind of sometimes the bounce goes your way, and sometimes it doesn't. With Chelsea, it had the more shots, 15-6. Chelsea did have a lower XG, but six big chances for Chelsea, and just five missed, and 565 passes for Chelsea, 89%, 282 for Wolves, but for all that passing, Chelsea did create. You can't say that, but again, it was there was a lot of times when it didn't seem like Chelsea really knew what the purpose behind the pass was. I guess I can say that. Uh,
It's weird because I don't understand what Conor Gallagher does as far as a role in the team anymore. I understand he can sometimes be a really good at pressing. Um, Maybe he can sometimes, has he's really the only one in the team that runs. I guess you can say that. Sometimes you can get behind Caicedo. He struggles. Enzo definitely. I don't really like what he offers. Uh, but as far as anything else, it feels awkward. Sometimes he doesn't know either. I think where the first goal comes from for Wolves, uh, Chelsea do a good job of actually playing out of pressure. It looks like Wolves are pressing them into a couple mistakes, but they were able to get away from that. And then the ball goes out wide. Conor Gallagher passes it to I think Ben Chilwell out wide, and after that, Conor Gallagher decides to run all the way to the sideline or to the touchline himself. I think he's trying to create space for Caicedo to get the ball, but all he's really doing is he's leaving Caicedo alone. And when he gets the ball, Caicedo has a bad touch, and immediately Caicedo is bullied. I think it's by Yao Gomez, and then it's Neto, and basically from there they're able to get the counter on. So it's just the weird situations like that. I don't really like Cole Palmer, to be honest, on the right wing. Uh, because he likes cutting from the right wing to inside to kind of create two, and it's just that feels like Gallagher is sometimes in that spot too, and he doesn't really know if he's supposed to kind of switch over. I don't know. It doesn't seem like they're trying to do positional switching too, but it doesn't feel like they understand when to do it necessarily. Now, again, they haven't Pochettino hasn't really had a lot of these guys fit for really any of the season. And Cuckoo only made his second start, or maybe he even made his first start. He made his first start at least at the bridge. So there can be some of that, but I do think for the most part, Chelsea are getting outrun in games, at least in situations in games, and I kinda put that down to the players themselves. There's a lot of blame to go around, and there's gonna be looks at Pochettino, his name's gonna be thrown around. I've seen I think it's NBC that even brought it up that Jose Mourinho has been talked about, but Jose Mourinho is not gonna come to a club that's under financial fair play infractions with sanctions heading their way where he can't spend anymore. And Chelsea have going to possibly have to sell a lot. I think it generate 100 million in profit, in pure profit. So it's not just selling, Conor Gallagher for 40. Well, Conor Gallagher's an academy, so that would be full profit. You're not going to be able to sell a player for an X fee. But if it's basically what you paid for him in the beginning, that's not really going to work, and you can't make a loss. And some of these players might be looking at losses. So they're in a big situation. Also, Euros are this summer. Copa America is this summer. Usually, agents don't like doing deals before tournaments because, say, a player gets injured or say a player has a spectacular tournament, their value goes up. So usually, you wait till after those tournaments happens. So in that case, I maybe it's July 30th, not June. They're going to have a very small window to get all of this done. If the reporting, if the rumors are true, maybe it's nonsense. Maybe that's just internet gossip. I don't know. But if it is that, I don't really understand how they're going to be able to do that and not suffer infractions. And two, they're not going to be able to afford a striker that they really want. So they're kind of stuck with where they're at. That's another thing too. They missed six big chances. A couple that Sterling really should have done better on. There's a Nicholas Jackson header that I like the idea that he's in position. He gets a good head on the ball, but he just misses it completely. And it's so there's some of that. I mean, he's just gotten back from AFCON. Maybe he's tired. Could be rusty. There could be some of that. But he's also been struggling to score all season. We need to see if that combination with Jackson and Nkuku that we saw in the summertime for the summer series in the USA shows up or not. I kind of think it will. A lot of people kind of downplay what happens in the summer. I'm not one of those. I think you're not going to get a game situation kind of pressing wise, but I think you can get chemistry. I think you can see if players like playing with each other. If you can see they have an understanding where someone's going to make a run, you can play off them. I think you do kind of see that in the summertime, and I think what we saw was real. I think they can there's a pretty good understanding between the two of them. So. Uh, We'll have to because Nkuku didn't start this game. He came on in the second half, but he didn't come off for Nkuku. We saw for the or maybe he did. I kind of forget. But at the same time, how do you fit in Cuckoo, Jackson, and Gallagher on at the same time? So there's some of that too. I don't. Another thing is there's a lot of rotation. Mudrick's in the lineup sometimes. Sometimes he's not. Sterling likewise. We've seen Medareke sometimes. Sometimes not. I don't really know if Pochettino knows who his starting 11 is. And they're only playing once a week football. You're not really able to get a well. I guess they're still alive in the FA Cup, and still they have the Carabao Cup final coming up. And I'm actually kind of worried a little bit about that because it feels like that could be something where those players can look at this season being a throwaway. But if they win that, maybe that can give them some bragging rights and something to crow about. So we'll have to see. I mean, I don't necessarily need to repeat myself from last week, but I do think larger picture. Thiago Silva, this has to be his last season. He is 39 anyways. That probably was in the cards. I think you need to phase him out too. I mean, if the second Levy Colwell becomes fit, apparently he's been hurt a little bit. Like if for the Carabao final, if Levy Colwell is fit, I would play him. I would play him and maybe Diaze as the right center back. And next year you maybe have Augusto. You can either play Gusto on the left, or maybe you can play him on the right. I mean, next year you'll have Reece James. You can Reece James back maybe. So Reece James right back. You have Wesley Fofana maybe coming back. Maybe you can play him and Colwell, and that can kind of be something you build on. Uh, if Gusto can't play on the left, you maybe have Ian Mountain, he's good enough to be at Dortmund. Maybe you can play him instead. Ship Chilwell away because Chilwell's kind of struggling. Even returning from injury, he hasn't looked good in the last couple of games. But, again, no one really runs in the team other than Gallagher, and I think Gallagher is off it when it comes to where do you play him. So there's still a lot of negatives I think at Chelsea, and then I mentioned how it's probably not really on Pochettino, but at the same time, I think the negative for him is you can look at Ange at Spurs, you can look at Iraola at Bournemouth, and Gary O'Neill at Wolves as far as a direct comparison. And those teams, those clubs have in the same amount of time have formed an identity, a style of play, and consistency that you haven't seen out of Chelsea. And so that's a bit of the negative. But Pochettino hasn't had a lot of his players fit to go this season. So I think there's been some of that. I think maybe the scouting they got wrong. I think they maybe tried to hit too many wild cards when maybe spending a lot of money to do it. Playing blackjack when they had when they maybe shouldn't have. But there's because spent so much money on Mudryk and Caicedo and Enzo, and yeah, it is when you look at their attackers, it's they've been struggling for goals other than Sterling. And Cuckoo can maybe kind of fix a little of some of that, but it's not enough. And then with Wolves, it's a celebration of Wolves. I think it's really nice or a really good tactic that we saw from Neil, where he played Cunha underneath Neto. Neto was kind of the free role in the front centrally. He played Sarabia with Cunha to kind of be a presser, so they were able to press with three attackers. And Cunha, I thought, was brilliant at trailing runs. Nuno when Neto was doing all the running ahead, he'd have a free run, and Cunha would be able to make some runs from deeper, making it harder to find him. And I liked it. I liked the change. So usually you see Cunha kind of being the front leader. You saw Neto in this game, so I liked that change. And then Yao Gomez and Mario Lemina. They sold Ruben Neves last summer. They sold Mateus Nunez to Man City. This is a pretty good partnership that's just kind of come out of nowhere. It's one of the better pivots in the league. Both well-rounded, both terrific in possession, duels, challenges, winning the ball back. Lemania does some really good off-the-ball runs. We've seen him kind of be have an eye for goal this season as well. And I mean, I thought it's pretty awesome for me to see. O'Neill won me over last year when he was at Bournemouth, and I was a little worried about him taking the Wolves side or job because he did it 5 days before the season started. I looked at that side in the beginning. I think I did like a preview. I was worried about them maybe being a team to fight relegation or maybe go down because this is a team that has struggled to score goals for like 3 or 4 years in a row. And they didn't really, and they lost Ruben Neves. They lost and they sold Mateus Nunez. And you didn't know, Pedro Neto was coming off an injury. You didn't know how he was going to fit in. Wangley Chain, I think, the most he had scored all season since he'd been at Wolves was like 5, and he got 6 after he had 6 after, like, October. And they have him to come back. Mateus Nunes, the kind of improvement that we've seen, this season from him, he used to be a giant liability in front of the net. All he has here is a hat trick. Now, he did get a couple of deflections to go his way, but he doesn't look afraid of the goal anymore. He's starting to score more. He had a great goal versus Man United. He has a shot on him now. So, the 3rd goal, the cutback from Neto, that requires a pretty good finish, and there's no deflection on that. So he's not afraid anymore, and I kinda put that down to him. And, the other thing I wanna say is when you can outrun a team, as a collective, you can look better than the other. And so I think it was NBC's Robbie Earle who was like, he'd fancy the Wolves players over Chelsea. In a weird way, he's not wrong to say that, and I think O'Neil has done a terrific job to motivate these guys, to work their socks off, and, basically, he seems to give them they seem to like playing for him because he gives them freedom to dribble, with the ball when maybe the space is there. I mean, we've seen that with Neto, Cunha, Wang Lee-Chan, we've also seen it with Ait Nouri and Lamena and Gomez, and, I think we've seen it with, Semedo in between times, and they never really got at defensively like you maybe would expect. So I mean, they're a well called stud. They really are. So I think it's pretty awesome to see, because there's no talk at all about them being even considering being a team to struggle or go down. So they look like they're going to have assuming no more serious injuries, they can maybe be a side to finish top half of the table, and no one would have expected that going into the season. So just an amazing job by O'Neil. And when you look at another thing that's negative for Chelsea is Wolves are doing this. I think they're even higher than Chelsea in the table now, or at least they're close to. Wolves are doing this having a net spend of like nothing, where Chelsea have spent like £1 billion in a year. So it's not a great comparison for Pochettino, and Wolves have done the double on Chelsea as well. So it's that's not positive. And then Brighton and Crystal Palace, I kind of set it up a little bit. It's a disaster for Roy Hodgson and Crystal Palace. I don't necessarily need to spend a ton of time detailing the goals. I mean, Brighton were thumped by Luton Town, so they wanted to give a response back, and they did. They responded with for De Zerbi. And with Crystal Palace, I wrote down before the game, can Olise and Eze be enough? Because they were magical over Sheffield, but they haven't been able to go more than 4 games all season together. And Olise doesn't start, comes on in halftime and gets hurt. Injures his hamstring. Eze can't go the entire game. And looking back, that could be if Palace do go down, that could be the decision that does it. You don't want to speculate. You don't want to be too dramatic. But it's a horrible decision by Roy Hodgson, and it's something you would expect, maybe a new manager trying to impress, to do something, or you would expect someone else to make that call, not someone as veteran as Hodgson. And the only thing I can think about is he's feeling pressure from the board to perform better. Uh, and even at that situation, he's 76 years old. He's done anything. He's managed England. He doesn't need to impress anyone with his resume. He kept Palace up last season. It was just bizarre. It was bizarre that he fell for that. He made comments after the game saying that he'd been cleared to only play half a game, but somewhat cleared. But if you're dealing with a hamstring, you're not, especially if it's tightness or if it's a tweak. What they played in midweek. It's not enough time, and it's just maybe they thought he could play without doing a sprint. But the first thing he did was he tried to go in a full out sprint, and he made 5 steps before pulling up. So the only thing you can say is it doesn't look torn. It's not like he had to be stretchered off. But if it's tight, he's not going to be able to play for 3 to 4 weeks. And Palace are going to be in a situation where they're going to have to be chasing points. If we see Everton go on a bit of a run, uh, Luton look like they can maybe pass Palace too. They're not far away from that. Sheffield's probably done. We can probably X them out. We don't know what Burnley is going to be. I keep waiting for Burnley to change, and for the most part, they haven't. So I don't know. I don't necessarily need to spend a ton of time on Palace because they were without those 2 players, they were dreadful. They just couldn't keep the ball. They also had a couple injuries. They had no Joe Ward, so they had to play this new guy, Munez, at right back, and basically Brighton really decided to have fun with him with Tyreek Lamptey. Um, and a couple changes for Brighton with Lamptey and Henselwood at fullbacks, and that basically is what won them the game. Every kind of goal that they created, it was Lamptey having a lot of fun on the ball on the wing, having some crosses. It was Yao Pedro coming in and being a link up in the beginning to come drop into midfield. Palace couldn't lay a glove on any of the Brighton players. I like when Pedro and Ferguson actually play together, to be honest, and Ferguson didn't necessarily lead to any goals, but he's such a big presence that he's really annoying because when Pedro will like drop in, you still have someone that's as physical and dominating, to torment that back line, so they can't really follow Pedro, and that was happening a lot too. And then, one of the goals they score is a beautiful one by Bornete, and I kind of made a mention last week. I don't really know where he necessarily fits, but when you can have width elsewhere, and he can kind of be like a final third kind of player, he's showing he's got a pretty good finish on him. He scored a wonderful goal for Sheffield as well, and he had a beautiful finish here. There's a pretty good link up by with Pascal Gross in one of the goals, and I've been kind of critical that I didn't know if Pascal Gross and Billy Gilmore is enough in midfield. In this game, they both did their job to win the ball back and were much better in possession. I don't necessarily know if it was a one-off. Luton Town, it was just it, but I think James Milner played a role into that a little bit, and Estupiñán, it doesn't offer the runs in behind and the pace that Tyreek Lamptey offers. Now, in this game, if maybe Elise is able to go instead, maybe the idea could have been to punish that. With Lamptey being able to play that way, you have Elise being able to make some runs the other way and kind of punish that. Maybe that was what Roy Hodgson was thinking. Maybe he thought that would at least push Lamptey to give it back. I can't say, but Lamptey had a free run in a game in this situation, and Palace would just pin down. The final stat that I saw was amazing. I think it was like, was it 800 passes? Yeah, 795, 94% accuracy. They couldn't lay a glove on him. De Zerbi got his reaction. Another thing you saw in a lot of these goals is, or at least creations, was there'd be a few times when Crystal Palace somewhat seemed like they were in a pretty good shape, but it would be Van Hecke or Lewis Dunk or even Ugo Julio, like the Palace's Brighton's defenders. They would have the ball at their feet. Maybe Pascal Gross and Billy Gilmore would be covered, but Al Pedro would come in and be an option for the ball, and he was really doing a good job at quickly turning around and getting around Anderson or someone trying to follow him. And Brighton were really good at finding that pass. Al Pedro was really good at either being able to knock it around to someone or being able to turn himself. And more often than not, Tyreek Lamptey would be wide open, and that was kind of the outlet. And they were doing that a lot. So it was a much better performance from Brighton. I mean, they hadn't necessarily been playing terrible. They just hadn't really been able to score, and that kind of finished. That kind of changed here. I mean, only 13 shots, but six on target. But 700 passes and 4 goals. They'll Man City and Pep will take that every day, and so will De Zerbi. I mean, that's almost perfection. And unfortunately, it comes at Hodgson's expense, unfortunately. And again, the Elise news is devastating. Mark Gahey had to come out in this game, and they had to bring on they made a business that they brought in some transfer business on deadline day. I think it's a center back from it's Blackburn or some kind of some championship side, and he got a run in. He had to come in because of Gahey, and not necessarily like he played terrible, but he actually got fooled a little bit by the fourth goal that Brighton scored. Danny Welbeck has a beautiful little back heel to kind of play Yao Pedro. It's kind of a 1-2, and Pedro does another job of being able to make a run to the box and offers some goals. So he was at the heart of kind of everything positive that Brighton did. Really, he's been the heart of everything positive Brighton have done for the last month and a half. They've been missing a lot of their key attackers. And one thing that's funny is I mentioned last week, kind of going at a little bit of their recruitment. Yeah, I mentioned, Carlos Beba, maybe Bernete hasn't really worked out. James Milner, iffy. Someone that they got right is Al Pedro. You can imagine him being on any kind of, I don't want to say maybe Man City, but any kind of top six side, maybe even Man City. Uh, he doesn't really look to have a weakness. To be honest, the way maybe in a different kind of setup, maybe he would have to do more running off the ball. But at least in here, he's quite good when he has the ball at his feet. He makes good decisions. He can cross it. He's shown that. Has a good finish on him. He's not really afraid to goal, afraid in front of goal. And those moments when they've been missing someone like Matoma on the left to have some speed and pace, he's offered a different job. And again, I like it when him and Ferguson are able to play together. They seem to have a pretty good connection. Though in this game, Welbeck came on and he had a pretty good connection with Welbeck. So I mean, because they've been missing, they haven't struggled necessarily creating. Well, they kind of have, but Yao Pedro has kind of kept them up in this little stretch where they have been dropping some points. They won a couple games not really scoring any goals, and they scored 5 versus Sheffield. But this was back to being Brighton, where Brighton are feel comfortable with themselves, and with Crystal Palace again. I think one kind of note I wanted to say is hamstrings are terrifying because you don't know once you've kind of tweaked it, it's so hard to rush recovery because you never really know when it's going to come up again. And I'm kind of worried about that with Mo Salah. I keep hearing about he's thinking about coming back from recovery, and I don't really like that. Uh, so there's a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of players have to be responsible. They have to know their bodies. That's not always easy. We saw that last season with Kevin De Bruyne. He these are fickle things, where it seemed like his minutes were babied, and then he went to the Champions League final, pushed himself just one little too much, and he had to go off. And so this is not ideal. And he's been dealing with a hamstring since he returned from injury. And I think the reason why he got that is maybe he rushed back from having a broken foot. Sometimes that can happen when you're not fully healed. What would be the word? When you're not fully healed, you can maybe kind of rely on other. Maybe you compromise yourself a little bit. I'm trying to think of the word, but that possibly could have been a situation too, where maybe he was trying to rely a little bit on other muscles than he should have, and I can't really speculate, but it's not great, and it's we'll have to see what they were like without him. But other than that, Rod Hodgson has to switch it up. He can't do what he did. He's gonna have to trust Mateus Franca to be able to get Prim ready. Rick Saki apparently has a hamstring injury as well, but they need to see him back. Uh, Ozo and Ahmad Hatta as midfield options need to be thought about because what they were doing. I mean, Will Hughes has a horror show in this game. I feel like Chris Richards is trying to learn a position that he's not really. It's not really his, and so and they've been without Toure since November. Maybe you're finally starting to see some of that as well. This could really honestly crater, unfortunately for Palace. And then I'll kind of end with Sheffield and Aston Villa. I don't necessarily need to go over a ton of the goals. I mean, Villa scored 5 before really the 45th minute mark. That's kind of unfortunate too for Aston Villa. When you win by so much, no one really wants to. No, everyone will kind of say what you did, but no one really wants to spend a lot of time as far as details. I mean, I kind of put them at the end, unfortunately, as well. I mean, 14 shots and 10 on target. 10 shots on target was target practice. It felt like they could have scored any number they wanted. I mean, it was weird how Sheffield went into this with a back five, but it was a back five that was playing high up, and the runs in behind was just it shouldn't have been there. It was just so easy for Watkins to just run behind either Mason Holgate, Admahanovic, or I don't want to say it was Austin Trusty, but it could have been Austin Trusty. Those are the 3 center backs, and then Norton Davis had a horror show of a game as well. Leon Bailey did not respect him, and there were a couple of times when Watkins was actually being the provider, running into midfield, and seeing Leon Bailey having a free run up the middle, and Leon Bailey had a beautiful goal for his, and then right before halftime, Villa had like 3 or 4 corner kicks in a row. There was one where they actually set up an attempt for Yuli Tielemans, and he had a beautiful volley, and it looked like it was heading into the net, but it was cleared off the line. But Villa, second corner kick, they do it again. They find the Tielemans again, and Tielemans, sets himself up and has a wonderful shot. He just has bangers in him when he scores. I think they said it was his first goal as an Aston Villa player. But, I mean, and they scored, the 5th one in the, like, first minute into halftime. So whatever speech, inspiring speech that, uh, Chris Wilder gave to Sheffield, it didn't really last long. And it's another situation where just Sheffield players are kind of, ball watching. They're not really rocking, they're not really, paying attention. and Watkins is able to just run into a loose ball, and he has a little cross into back post. No one's marking the guy at the back post, and it's Moreno, and Moreno has a pretty good volley. So this was not good for Sheffield, and they mentioned how they've conceded more than anyone else. I mean, they brought in Chris Wilder because this is what they were doing with Paul Heckenbottom, and this is the first time where you saw that same team show up, and we saw a different lineup. We had seen Austin Trusty kind of been playing at fullback. In this case, he was a third mid center back with Mason Holgate. Mason Holgate, who got his first start being a loan from Southampton. Apparently, he didn't play well at Southampton. Didn't even play many games for them. I remember him in Everton. I didn't necessarily think he was great for Everton too. He was playing a lot of games when Everton were in that relegation fight. That was the season when they were losing. So it was before they had Tarkowski. That was the season when they were losing Yuri Mina, and they relied on Holgate, and him and Godfrey, and Godfrey was better, but Holgate was really struggling when he was at Everton, and he just allowed Watkins to run behind him the first couple of goals. So not really great. Not great to because it doesn't seem like they. I mean, they needed some help, but it doesn't seem like maybe Holgate's going to be the person. Well, I mean, it's only first game. It is worth saying that. So maybe he'll get better. I thought Holgate actually when he was at Everton was kind of a fullback, anyways. So I don't know. I was a bit surprised by that. When you hear someone doing a back five, you expect the space in behind to be kind of limited, and it wasn't. So that was a bit surprising as well. But Aston Villa just really. I think the reason why I think I mentioned it before, the reason why maybe it wasn't a 10-0 kind of game is because Konsa got injured, and they do have a big game versus Chelsea in the FA Cup replay. They're probably going to fancy themselves, though it is, I think, at Stamford Bridge, and Chelsea probably got a little embarrassed for the last couple of games. Maybe they're going to go into this, guns a blazing. We'll have to see. But the Konza injury scare probably, put called off the dogs. Maybe everyone didn't want to really push themselves after that. Game was already done, so it makes sense. Sheffield did show some signs of life after that, but you can't. I really don't know how much promise you can put it into that. I do think Cam Archer should play more. Him and Brennan Diaz and McBurnley seem to show some stuff, but I don't know what you can do to fix the back line. It's the most goals conceded throughout this many games. They said, and I don't. They're probably done. I think not just probably. I mean, there is a points deduction potentially to come to Nottingham Forest and Everton to maybe bring them down, but it does feel like Burnley and Sheffield are kind of inked in, and I think one kind of note I had was, I don't really like Chris Wilder. I feel like he had dinosaur views back in 2020 when he was really opposing. Let's see, he was really opposing the Prem moving to five of subs. So I've just always kind of I've opposed him since, and he came in. Apparently he like had a meltdown because some reporter or some assistant ref was talking to him after the game, and apparently he had a sandwich, and he thought that was disrespectful because he's a Premier League manager, and why are you having a sandwich in front of his face? And it's just weird. So I don't know. Maybe players are kind of getting the similar kind of edge. I can't really say. He didn't really have a lot of comments after the post game. So I mean, they ran into a buzzsaw. There could be some of that, but before this, they had somewhat looked competitive. I thought they were unlucky versus Crystal Palace, but it is what it is. And then Bournemouth and Forest played to a 1-1. Mentioned how it's Clivert. They get it's the second game in a row where Bournemouth get an early goal, but aren't really able to create much after that. And then Hudson-Odoi had a beautiful goal in his own right. This game was a lot of stop and start. Not really. Neither team had a lot of control. Uh, so both teams had midfields to struggle. There was a lot of fouls. There was a lot of stop and starts in the game. The only other action that happened in the second half was Billing going to ground and stamping on Hudson-Odoi's ankle. We'll have to see what the repercussions of that is. Billing's going to miss 3 games now because of that. And then there was a 10 plus extra minute or at a time. I think it was like 7 minutes of at a time to do something. And unfortunately, Forest weren't able to really create. Other than that, we did see Gio Reyna get his debut. Didn't I mean he looked tidy on the ball, but he wasn't. They weren't really able to create much after that. But when in those games when maybe teams are pressing Forest, and Forest actually have the lead, and they need to see a game out. Gia looked quite good for them. So we'll see. We'll see how this works. I didn't really like him coming on for Anthony Alanga. Maybe him for Gibbs White would make more sense, or maybe Gibbs White maybe played further ahead. Keep Alanga because Alanga was needed to stretch the field out, and they kind of lost that. Uh, it's a couple of situations in the game where they were able to create for Tyro Awani, and his finish lacked, but he was getting into pretty good spots, and it is only his second game back. I think he could be just be rest. He looked pretty good for Arsenal as well, so I think there's some positives for Forest in that respect. Matt Sells didn't have a lot to do with the yeah, he got his debut over Matt Turner. Matt Turner had that mistake versus Arsenal. Looks like Turner maybe lost his job. So they brought in Sells. I think they paid 30 million for him, and they're already under financial fair play situations. So they kind of rolled the dice a little bit on this guy, and he didn't have much to do, but he did make a couple good saves in the second half. With Bournemouth, one thing to say too is they weren't really able to create much for Solanke, but and they lost to maybe Semenyo, I think, in the second half. But they were able to get Dango Watatara back, who came onto the scene for them last season. We haven't really seen him much this season. He looked quite good for them for the first time in a really long time. And so that can be maybe positive. He showed what he offered a little bit last season with his pace and behind, but also really good delivery and decision makings in the final third. Even down a man, Bournemouth were the team that looked they were the team that was possibly going to be the team to score because of him. He was the one that was actually looking to make those runs behind, looking to play really dangerous balls into the box that forced pretty good defending. So that's kind of the all I want to say really about that game. Yeah, Bournemouth 9 shots, only two on target. Forest with 8 and 6. Neither team with a lot of passing numbers. Bournemouth at 229, 69%. Forest with 329, 77%. Uh, and then with another thing to say is Ariola. I think he even mentioned it in his post game. His he asked his team to do a lot of running without the ball. They're high intense and pressing, and what they did is they basically rotated a lot in the second half, so that maybe kind of affected Bournemouth a little bit to lose some of that chemistry. Uh, it somewhat worked. I mean, neither team really had a lot of the ball. There were a lot of fouls, like as I mentioned, the and then with Nottingham Forest. I think it's positive that they kept Solanke quiet. Not a lot of teams can do that. So positive for their back line. I thought Murillo had a pretty good game as well. Pretty good in possession. He makes some pretty good runs. Similar to Alessandro Martinez in that respect. Uh, Not necessarily. I think he's not really Martinez's height. I think he's like Thiago Silva's height. Um, but he's aggressive. He's a defender that's really aggressive, and he'll carry the ball when it comes. So he's a unique player in his right as well. And then the new keeper didn't necessarily didn't have a ton to do, but did do enough in the end. And then Burnley and Fulham end 2-2 in a bit of a wild game because Fulham got the first two goals lead. Got the first two goals, with first being a Paulinho. I think it's a corner kick, and Paulinho is able to head it in. Early goal, I mean, you're just conceding on a corner kick, and then the second one, it's just it comes from nothing really. I think it's Anthony Robinson just has like a flick, or basically he's trying to clear the ball, and it just falls into Munez's feet path. Apparently, Baroja wasn't able to go. It's too early for him, and Jimenez was apparently out injured. So it's good they at least had Munez to at least play, and he's able to flick it in. So good goal for him. But and Fulham did do enough to probably win the game. They had a lot of the ball, but at the same time, they weren't able to actually get that third. And Burnley were able to Company was able to uh, make that call to bring on Fofana in the second half. And you saw almost instantly. Odegaard and Fofana had a pretty good connection of where each other wanted to be, and they were playing off each other. And I think the first goal even comes from Fulham having a corner kick. They were there was a time when they had like 3 or 4 corner kicks in a row. Fulham were dominating the ball in their end, and Burnley were able to just quickly on the Fulham corner kick, were able to win the ball, and they're able to have a quick counter themselves. I think they beat Kenny Tete on the wing. Odegaard is able to sprint, and Odegaard has or it's maybe it's not Odegaard, it's Asanson. He's free on the wing, and he has a cross into the box, and unfortunately for Fulham, Leno has been a great keeper for them, but he had a howler of a miss here. He tries to go for the ball and just completely whiffs, and Fofana showed really good pace to just catch up, and it's a free header into the box, and then this is the one that Tade screws up on. And towards the very end of the game, just a direct ball that finds Odeberg. Tenekete tries to deflect it and misses the ball, and then Odegaard is able to run all the way up the wing and has a cross into the box. And Tim Ream is with Fofana, but misses out on the pace. And unfortunately for Fulham, I think is another situation where you see Tim Ream when Calvin Bassey returns isn't probably going to be the preferred option. I think another thing too is when Alex Iwobi returns, he immediately comes back into the team. So I think Fulham were kind of just missing some of that as well. I mean, Burnley got away with one. I mean, Fulham 56% of the ball, 15 and 7. Burnley with 12 and 4. Actually, it was about 1.2, 1.5 apiece. So this maybe some of that. Uh, and with Burnley, I think it's positive that you're seeing Odegaard shine a little bit. Decent decent sub decision by Company. David Fofana again, 3 goals in 2 games, but they're still conceding goals way too easily. And again, Liverpool up next. Liverpool without Kanate, but I think Kwanzaa can has shown he can do a pretty good job. But maybe they can get something with Odegaard or Fofana in behind. We'll have to see. But good talent ID to scout them. It is worth saying that. But they need to. They can't just be dropping point. They can't just be picking up a point here and there. Burnley need to start getting all 3. We'll have to see if they are able to do that. And so I mean, there's still time. There's still time for them as well. And so that rounds us up. I'm kind of a little bit out of breath. I figured I probably would. Could have done the whole episode with Arsenal and Liverpool. Glad I didn't. But it is what it is. I think it's kind of fitting because I did the last episode, and that was like my kind of Klopp episode where it was my first chance to really talk about him, and basically I just praised him left and right. It is kind of fitting. Maybe I went a little overboard. There could be some of that. I think it also. I'm not going to say it explains why maybe it's time for him to go. I will say that when you look at maybe the Gakpo that's come in or Gravenberch, some of these situations that Pep Linders has led or has advised, maybe some of that has kind of reached a little of his course. I mean, I shouldn't overreact. It is just one game, but a lot of the things that I was saying last week is just Klopp has just gotten all of his second half decisions right this season. It was the first one he maybe didn't. You can't be right all the time. And one thing I didn't say last week is he looks physically drained, and maybe to get those second half decisions right every single week can take you out mentally. I think he even said that he's tired, and so that is where it is. We'll see how they're able to finish the season. It's still in their hands, but they don't have many playing cards that they can drop after this. So we'll have to see how it goes this week. I mean, it's still in their cards. As long as they can make it so that game at Anfield is what decides the title, we'll have to see. But at the same time, Arsenal are now only 2 points back themselves, so Arsenal are going to be looking their chops as well, and we'll see how Champions League and Europa, falls into this too. We'll see how Liverpool's trying to chase some titles and trying to chase that Carabao final. Maybe they try to do an FA Cup run. I think uh, they have another good draw. I think it's Southampton. So to advance to the semifinals in the FA Cup. So we'll see if maybe that kind of factors in a little bit as well. So, I mean, still a lot of the season to go. We're only in February, and the fun part about this is it goes till May. So, anyways, I'll be back next week to talk about what happens on the weekend. And with that, you stay squatty and stop recording.